There is a moment near the end of Regular Show, in the series finale that aired on January 16, 2017, where Pops Maillard, the cheerful, lollipop-shaped man who has spent 8 seasons giggling at butterflies and handing out lollipops, flies directly into a sun. He does it on purpose. He wraps his arms around his cosmic opposite, a being called Antipops, and he carries them both into annihilation. The screen goes white, the music drops out, and when the light fades, Pops is gone. Not unconscious, not transported to another dimension. Gone. Dead. Erased from the physical universe, in an act of self-sacrifice so total that there is nothing left to bury. And the show holds on that whiteness for longer than you expect. It does not cut to a joke. It does not soften the blow with a wink or a callback. It just lets you sit in the absence of the kindest character in the entire series. And then it cuts to a park bench, 25 years later, where Mordecai and Rigby, now in their 50s, sit quietly together and remember the friend who saved everything by giving up everything. That is the show people are talking about when they talk about Regular Show controversies. Not a gritty prestige drama, not an edgy Adult Swim experiment, a cartoon about a blue jay and a raccoon who work at a park and accidentally summon cosmic horrors every time they try to slack off. A show that aired on Cartoon Network, was rated PG, and was watched by millions of children who had no idea that the entire concept was born from a student film about 2 gas station employees dropping acid. Regular Show ran for 8 seasons. It premiered on September 6, 2010, and ended on January 16, 2017, producing over 240 episodes across that span. In that time, it was banned in multiple countries, sued by a real-life arcade champion, censored so aggressively in the United Kingdom that entire scenes had to be reanimated from scratch, and split its own fanbase down the middle over a love triangle that turned its protagonist into one of the most criticized characters in modern animation. It pushed the boundaries of what a children's network would allow on the air, and then it pushed them again and again and again, until the boundaries themselves became part of the story. This is a video about all of it. Every controversy, every backlash, every moment where the show went too far, or not far enough, or in a direction nobody expected. And more importantly, this is about how the fans reacted, because the controversies themselves are interesting, but the reactions reveal something deeper about what this show meant to the people who grew up with it, and what it means to care about a cartoon so much that you feel personally betrayed when it makes a choice you disagree with. Welcome to Velvo. Get comfortable, settle in, turn the lights down low. This is going to take a while. And that is the point. We are going to move through this slowly, carefully, the way the show itself moved through its best episodes. And if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. Hit that button now, settle into your pillow, and let us get into it. To understand why Regular Show was controversial, you have to understand where it came from. And where it came from is a place that Cartoon Network would rather you not think about too carefully. Between 2002 and 2006, a young animator named J.G. Quintel attended the California Institute of the Arts, better known as CalArts, the school that has produced more influential animators per square foot than any other institution in the country. At CalArts, Quintel and about 20 fellow students, including Sam Marin, who would go on to voice Benson, Pops, and Muscle Man, developed their short films through a ritual that sounds almost deliberately chaotic. They would throw title names into a hat, words like lollipop or candy. They would draw them out at midnight, read them aloud, and then rush back to their desks in a marathon effort to produce a complete short film in 48 hours based on that single word. Out of this process came 2 shorts that matter for this story. The first was The Naive Man from Lollyland, which introduced the character of Pops and won 2 awards at the 2005 Nicktoons Film Festival. The second was 2 in the AM PM, created in 2006, which is the short that became the direct ancestor of Regular Show. And 2 in the AM PM is not a children's cartoon. The short follows 2 gas station employees working the night shift. They take acid-laced candy. The trip begins. Reality distorts. One of the characters transforms into a blue jay. The other transforms into a gumball machine. There is profanity throughout. There is brief nudity. The humor is explicitly adult. The aesthetic is lo-fi and deliberately rough. It was accepted into the 2007 Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Animation Festival, which, if you are not familiar with it, is a festival that has historically programmed content that makes South Park look restrained. Those two characters, the Blue Jay and the Gumball Machine, became Mordecai and Benson. The surreal, reality-warping escalation that happens during the acid trip became the template for every single episode of Regular Show, where a mundane situation spirals into supernatural chaos. The DNA of a student film about recreational drug use is woven into every frame of a cartoon that aired in the afternoon on a children's network. This is not a secret. It is documented. It is discussed in interviews. J.G. Quintel has never hidden the origins of his show. But the distance between 2 in the AM PM and the version of Regular Show that premiered on Cartoon Network in 2010 is a controversy in itself. Not because anyone tried to suppress it, but because the knowledge of those origins colored everything about how the show was received. Parents who discovered the short film online questioned whether Regular Show was appropriate for their children. Media watchdog groups pointed to the connection as evidence that the show was smuggling adult content past network censors. And fans, particularly older fans who watched the show in college, embraced the connection as proof that Regular Show was operating on a level that other cartoons were not. Think about what that means. The very first controversy surrounding Regular Show is not about something the show did, it is about something the show was. It was born from adult content, sanitized for children, and then watched by both audiences simultaneously, each seeing a different show. The children saw a funny cartoon about a park. The college students saw a show winking at them from behind the screen, smuggling references to stoner culture and existential dread past the content guidelines. And the parents saw a threat. Common Sense Media, the most widely consulted parental review site in the United States, gave Regular Show a rating indicating it was not suitable for children under 12 or 13. Their review cited slapstick violence, intoxicated characters, crude humor, coarse language, sexual innuendo, and racial and cultural stereotyping. The review noted that characters are seen drinking what appears to be beer, sometimes to the point where they act drunk or get sick. It flagged the language, words like pissed, screwed, and crap, as inappropriate for younger viewers. It acknowledged that the show was rated PG, not G, not Y7, but argued that the rating itself was insufficient warning for parents who assumed that anything on Cartoon Network during daytime hours was safe for small children. And here is where the controversy becomes genuinely interesting. Because the parents were not wrong. The show absolutely contains all of those things. Mordecai and Rigby's adventures are driven by the same narrative engine as the acid trip in 2 in the AM PM. A mundane situation escalates into psychedelic chaos. The characters encounter beings from other dimensions. Reality breaks down. The humor operates on multiple levels, with surface jokes for children and layered references for adults. There are Pink Floyd posters visible in the background of the characters' room. Digital clocks in the show display 4:20. The entire structure of a typical episode, two slackers do something innocuous. It spirals into a cosmic adventure. They barely survive. They learn nothing. Mimics the structure of a stoner comedy. Cannabis Destiny, a marijuana media network, reportedly included Regular Show on a list of top cartoons that are more adult than you think. And that placement, if accurate, was not a misread. It was a fair description of what the show was doing. Regular Show was a children's cartoon that was also, simultaneously and deliberately, a show for adults who recognized what it was actually about. The controversy was not that people were reading too much into it. The controversy was that the reading was correct, and nobody could agree on whether that was a problem. But the adult content embedded in the show's DNA was only the beginning, because what happened next was something far more concrete, far more measurable, and far more revealing about how different cultures draw the line between acceptable and unacceptable content for children. Before we continue, if this video is something you are enjoying, go ahead and subscribe. It makes a real difference for the channel. Regular Show aired in dozens of countries across multiple continents. The version that played in the United States was the original, the baseline, the version that J.G. Quintel and his team intended audiences to see. But the version that played in the United Kingdom was different. The version that played in Australia was different. The version that played across Asia Pacific was different. And the version that played in Hungary, Poland, and Romania was, in some cases, non-existent, because certain episodes were banned outright and never aired at all. The censorship of regular show is not a footnote. It is one of the most extensive and fascinating case studies in international broadcast standards applied to animation, and the details are stranger than you might expect. Start with the United Kingdom. In the UK, Cartoon Network operated under broadcasting guidelines that were significantly stricter than their American counterparts. The result was that hundreds of individual changes were made to regular show episodes before they could air. These were not subtle trims. They involved redubbing dialogue, reanimating sequences, and cutting entire scenes. And as the show progressed across its 8 seasons, the censorship guidelines became more strict, not less. Things that were deemed acceptable in the early seasons, punching, toilet humor, mild language, were retroactively tightened as standards shifted. The specifics are remarkable. In one episode, a line of dialogue that originally read, "How in the H are we gonna fix this S?" was changed to, "How in the H are we gonna fix this S?" In another, "But he is gonna be pissed," became, "But he is gonna be miffed." The word pissed was treated as profanity in the UK context, while in the American version, it was considered mild enough for a PG-rated afternoon cartoon. The word crap was replaced. The word moron was replaced in some countries but kept in others, while the word idiot followed the exact opposite pattern. At Emerald City Comic Con in 2026, voice actor William Salyers, who played Rigby, described the experience of recording these alternate lines. He explained that the cast had to change certain lines of dialogue depending on where the show was airing. In one country, it was acceptable to say idiot but not moron. In another country, it was acceptable to say moron but not idiot. The cast would record multiple versions of the same line, each calibrated to a different country's specific sensitivities. Think about what that means for the creative process. The show's writers would craft a joke, build a scene around it, time the delivery to a specific rhythm, and then watch as that rhythm was broken and reassembled differently for every territory. But the dialogue changes were only part of it. In the UK, entire sequences were reanimated. One of the most cited examples involves the character of Margaret, a Robin who serves as Mordecai's primary love interest in the early seasons. In the American version, Margaret is drawn with a body that the UK censors apparently deemed too suggestive for a children's cartoon, so the UK version was reanimated. Her proportions were altered, tail feathers were added to her design. The stated purpose was to remind viewers that she was a bird, not a human woman, as though the audience of a cartoon about talking animals needed to be reminded that the characters were not literally people. The change reveals something uncomfortable about the censorship process itself. It was not Margaret's behavior that was deemed inappropriate. It was her body. The censors looked at an animated bird and saw something sexual, and then they changed the animation to make her less attractive. That is not a content concern. That is a projection. The UK censorship extended to violence, death, and anything that could be interpreted as bullying. Scenes where characters were punched were cut or softened. References to death were removed or reframed. In Over the Top, a Season 2 episode that aired on August 15, 2011, the opening scene where Benson, Mordecai, Pops, and Skips are in a hospital as Rigby is pronounced dead was cut entirely from the UK broadcast. The episode, which involves Skips accidentally killing Rigby during an arm wrestling match and then arm wrestling Death himself to bring Rigby back to life, was deemed too intense for its depiction of death. Even though the death is temporary, even though the episode ends with Rigby alive and well, even though the show frames the entire sequence as a high-stakes adventure rather than a tragedy. That same episode, Over the Top, was banned entirely in Hungary, Poland, and Romania. Not censored, not edited, banned. It did not air in those countries during the show's original run. The reasons cited were extreme violence, crime, death, and sexual innuendo. And Over the Top was not the only episode to receive this treatment. Several episodes of regular show were banned outright in certain countries, with the specific episodes varying by region. Australia presents its own case study. Hello Governor, a Season 2 episode that originally aired on November 29, 2010, was banned in Australia due to its horror elements. The episode features Rigby watching a horror movie about a demonic British taxicab and then becoming so frightened that the cab manifests in reality. It is, by any reasonable standard, one of the lighter horror-themed episodes of the show. The cab is played for comedy. The scares are cartoonish. But Australian broadcast standards drew a line, and Elo Governor was on the wrong side of it. Cartoon Network Australia later released a censored version of the episode with specific scenes cut, but the initial ban was absolute. Brain Eraser, Season 2, Episode 10, which first aired on February 25, 2011, was refused broadcast by Cartoon Network Asia Pacific entirely. The episode centers on Mordecai accidentally seeing Pops naked, a sight so traumatic that he and Rigby resort to supernatural means to erase the image from his mind. The Asian broadcast standards flagged the episode for its high amount of sexual references and seizure-inducing visual effects. In Latin America, the episode was extensively edited, with Pops' nudity blurred, alternate footage substituted, and shots cropped and reframed from different angles. The edits were so extensive that the episode ran shorter than its standard runtime. After negative reception to the censored version, it was eventually re-aired uncut in some Latin American markets. Across Asia Pacific, the censorship was systematic. Words like crap, piss, and turd were replaced with crud, tick, and plank. Sexual references were cut. Near profanity was sanitized. The show that aired in Singapore or Malaysia or Thailand was, in many ways, a different show than the one that aired in the United States. The jokes landed differently because the language had been altered. The characters spoke differently because their most colorful expressions had been flattened. The edge that defined regular show, that sense that it was pushing against the boundaries of what a children's cartoon could contain, was systematically filed down until the show fit neatly within each country's comfort zone. And here is the thing about censorship that does not get discussed enough. Every single one of these changes was made by people who were trying to protect children. The UK censors, the Australian broadcasters, the Asian Pacific Standards Departments, they were all operating in good faith according to their own cultural norms. The controversy is not that they were wrong to censor, or that they were right. The controversy is that the same show, the same 11-minute episode, was simultaneously considered appropriate for children in one country and dangerous for children in another. The same joke was harmless in New Jersey and harmful in London. The same word was acceptable in Sydney and unacceptable in Budapest. Regular show became an inadvertent experiment in how different cultures define childhood, and the results of that experiment are written in the redubbed dialogue, the reanimated sequences, and the banned episode lists of a dozen countries. That is not a small thing. A cartoon about two slackers at a park became a mirror reflecting each culture's specific anxieties about what children should and should not see. And the show never changed. The show was always the same, only the world around it was different. But while entire countries were arguing about whether regular show was appropriate for their audiences, something much more personal was happening back in the United States. A man looked at a cartoon character and saw himself, and he did not like what he saw. His name is Billy Mitchell, and his fight with regular show would go all the way to federal court. Before we get into the details of the lawsuit, some context is necessary. Billy Mitchell is not a random citizen who felt slighted by a cartoon. He is one of the most famous and most controversial figures in the history of competitive gaming. He rose to prominence in the 1980s as a dominant player of classic arcade games, particularly Donkey Kong. He held world records. He appeared in the 2007 documentary, The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, where he was portrayed as the villain to Steve Wiebes' underdog hero. His persona, the slicked-back hair, the meticulously maintained beard, the expensive hot sauce brand, the intense defensiveness about his achievements, made him a figure of fascination and ridicule in gaming culture long before regular show existed. Mitchell's records have been disputed. Twin Galaxies, the organization that tracks competitive gaming scores, stripped him of his records in 2018, concluding that his submitted scores were achieved using a hardware setup that did not match what he claimed to have used. Mitchell has fought these rulings in court and through various public campaigns, and the disputes have continued for years. He is, in other words, a person for whom the question of legitimacy is deeply personal. His entire public identity is built on the claim that he is the best, and any challenge to that claim is experienced as an existential threat. It is into this context that Garrett Bobby Ferguson arrived. On February 7, 2011, Regular Show aired an episode called High Score. It was the 7th episode of the 2nd season. The plot is straightforward by Regular Show standards. Mordecai and Rigby discover an old arcade game at the park and become obsessed with beating the high score. The current record holder is a character named Garrett Bobby Ferguson, GBF, as he is abbreviated in the show. He appears as a giant floating bearded head, an alien being with no body, who has traveled across the galaxy to protect his record. He cheats, he rages. He is, by every measure, a villain. And Billy Mitchell, the real-life professional gamer, famous for his disputed world records in Donkey Kong, believed that Garrett Bobby Ferguson was a caricature of himself. The parallels were there if you wanted to see them. Billy Mitchell was famous for his meticulously groomed beard. Garrett Bobby Ferguson had a beard. Billy Mitchell was famous for holding arcade game world records. Garrett Bobby Ferguson holds an arcade game world record. Billy Mitchell was famous for his intense, combative personality in the competitive gaming world. Garrett Bobby Ferguson is intense and combative. The initials GBF are close enough to suggest a deliberate connection. The character's obsessive protection of his record mirrors the real Mitchell's well-documented defensiveness about his own scores. Mitchell took Cartoon Network to court. The lawsuit alleged that the character of Garrett Bobby Ferguson used his likeness and exaggerated his traits to appear, in his words, cartoonishly evil. He argued that the show had defamed him by associating his image with a villain who cheats, who is grotesque, who is ultimately defeated and humiliated. The case wound its way through the legal system for years. And in November 2015, New Jersey Federal District Judge Ann Thompson threw it out. The ruling is worth examining because it reveals something important about the legal line between parody and defamation, and about how the law treats animated characters differently than live-action portrayals. Judge Thompson noted that the television character does not match the plaintiff in appearance. She pointed out that Garrett Bobby Ferguson appears as a non-human creature, a giant floating head with no body from outer space, while Billy Mitchell is a human being. Cartoon Network's legal team argued that Garrett Bobby Ferguson was a transformative depiction of Mitchell, meaning that even if the character was inspired by him, it had been changed enough that it constituted protected speech under the First Amendment. The judge agreed. The show was protected. The lawsuit was dismissed. But Billy Mitchell did not let it go. He continued to express his displeasure publicly. When Regular Show, The Lost Tapes, the 2026 revival special, was released, Mitchell took to social media once again to share his dislike of the characters. Years after the original episode aired, years after the lawsuit was dismissed, the wound was apparently still fresh. And this is where the fan reaction becomes revealing, because the fans did not side with Billy Mitchell. Not even a little. The gaming community, which had its own complicated relationship with Mitchell due to the disputes surrounding his Donkey Kong records, found the situation hilarious. The fact that a real person had sued a cartoon for making him look bad was treated as comedy gold. The dismissal of the lawsuit was celebrated. Garrett Bobby Ferguson became, in many ways, more famous than Billy Mitchell himself. The character transcended the show. He became a symbol of how seriously people take their legacies and how absurd that seriousness can become when a cartoon is involved. The Billy Mitchell lawsuit is a clean controversy. It has a clear beginning, a clear middle, and a clear end. The legal system resolved it. The fans had their opinions. Everyone moved on. But the next controversy that would engulf Regular Show was not clean at all. It was messy. It was painful. It split the fan base in a way that has never fully healed. And it all started because a blue jay could not make up his mind about a girl. If you are enjoying this so far, subscribing really does help us keep making these. To understand the love triangle controversy, you have to understand what romance meant to Regular Show and what Regular Show meant to romance. For the first several seasons, Mordecai's feelings for Margaret Smith, a red-breasted robin who works at a coffee shop near the park, are the closest thing the show has to a traditional romantic subplot. Mordecai is awkward around her. He fumbles his words. He gets nervous. He overthinks everything. The comedy comes from the gap between his internal confidence, the version of himself he imagines being, and his external incompetence, the stammering, sweating, panicking version that Margaret actually sees. And the fans loved it. They loved it because it was real. Not realistic in the sense of grounded drama, but real in the sense of emotional truth. Mordecai's inability to talk to the girl he likes is one of the most universally relatable experiences in the human condition, and the show played it beautifully. The slow build across seasons 1 through 4, the near misses, the moments of connection followed by retreats into awkwardness. It felt earned. It felt like the show was building towards something. The culmination of this arc arrives in Stake Me Amadeus, a late season 4 episode. Mordecai has finally worked up the courage. He takes Margaret to a fancy restaurant. He is going to ask her to be his girlfriend. He has prepared for this. He has agonized over it. Everything in the show has been building to this moment. 4 seasons of fumbling, of near misses, of painful awkwardness, all of it leading to the single question that Mordecai has wanted to ask since the first episode. And he asks, and Margaret says no. Not because she does not care about him, not because she does not have feelings for him, because she got accepted into her dream college, a program far from the park, far from the coffee shop, far from Mordecai, and she chose her education over the relationship. She bursts into tears telling him, "It is not a rejection born from indifference. It is a rejection born from the impossible collision of 2 things a person wants, love and ambition, when the universe refuses to let them have both at the same time." In the context of the show, this was a mature, responsible decision. Margaret chose herself. She chose her future. She chose to be a person rather than a girlfriend. In the context of the fanbase, it was a seismic event. The relationship that viewers had invested 4 years in was suddenly gone. Not because it failed, not because the characters stopped caring about each other, because life got in the way. Because one person's dream required leaving another person behind, and the show treated this with a seriousness that elevated the moment beyond a typical cartoon plot point. Mordecai's pain was real. Margaret's tears were real. The impossibility of the situation was real, and nobody got what they wanted. The fan reaction to Stake Me Amadeus was surprisingly complex. Many fans respected Margaret's choice even as they mourned the relationship. They recognized that the show was making a statement about priorities, about the fact that romantic love, as powerful as it is, does not automatically supersede every other aspiration. Some fans were heartbroken on Mordecai's behalf, feeling that 4 seasons of emotional investment had been wasted. Others argued that the payoff was the heartbreak itself, that the show had earned this moment by making the audience care so deeply about a relationship that they felt the loss when it ended. And into the space that Margaret left, the show introduced CJ, a white cloud woman with a sharp wit, a competitive streak, and a capacity for genuine anger that Margaret never displayed. CJ was, in almost every way, a more dynamic love interest than Margaret. She challenged Mordecai. She pushed back when he was passive. She introduced him to new experiences. Their relationship had more fantasy adventures, more genuine moments of connection, more scenes where the two of them seemed to actually enjoy each other's company, rather than performing the rituals of courtship. The fans responded. Many of them fell in love with CJ as a character. They appreciated her chemistry with Mordecai. They noted that he seemed happier with her, more relaxed, more himself. The Margaret era had been defined by anxiety. The CJ era was defined by something closer to joy. And so when it became clear that the show was not going to let Mordecai simply move on, that Margaret would return, that the ghost of the first relationship would haunt the second, the fans braced for impact. They were right to brace. Eileen Flatscreen aired as part of Season 6. After being absent since the Season 5 premiere, Laundry Woes, Margaret reappeared. She had become a TV reporter. She had moved back to town, and the moment she returned, the fans knew what was coming. The Mordecai, Margaret, and CJ triangle was now inevitable. The discourse was immediate and passionate. Online communities split along factional lines that feel almost absurd in retrospect but were absolutely genuine at the time. Team Margaret argued that Margaret was Mordecai's true love, that their history together gave their relationship a depth that CJ could never match, that Margaret's decision to leave for college did not erase what they had. Team CJ argued that CJ was the better partner, that she brought out the best in Mordecai, that Margaret's return was a regression, a step backward for a character who had finally started to grow. Both sides had evidence, both sides had passion, and both sides were about to get hurt. There is a specific kind of betrayal that fans feel when a show makes a choice that contradicts the story they believed they were being told. It is not anger at a bad episode. It is not disappointment at a weak joke. It is the feeling of having invested emotionally in a narrative direction and then watching the show swerve away from it without warning, without explanation, without seeming to care about the investment you made. Merry Christmas, Mordecai is where that feeling hit the regular show fandom like a freight train. The episode is Season 6, Episode 10. It aired on December 4th, 2014. The premise is deceptively simple. There is a Christmas party at Eileen's house. Mordecai is there with CJ. Margaret is also invited. The tension is set up from the opening scene. Mordecai knows this is dangerous. CJ knows this is dangerous. The audience knows this is dangerous. And for a few minutes, the episode seems like it might navigate the situation gracefully, might acknowledge the awkwardness without detonating it. It does not. Mordecai and Margaret end up alone together. They start talking. The conversation drifts into memory, into the shared history that CJ cannot compete with because she was not there for it. And then they kiss. Mordecai and Margaret kiss at a Christmas party, while CJ is in the other room. While CJ, who trusted Mordecai, who believed that he had moved on, who believed that their relationship was real and present, and not just a placeholder until the original girl came back, is feet away. CJ sees. CJ runs away crying. The fan reaction was volcanic. Merry Christmas, Mordecai has been called the most hated episode of regular show in existence by multiple fan communities. The anger was directed at Mordecai, at Margaret, and at the writers themselves. Fans argued that Mordecai had cheated on CJ, that this was not the first time, which made it worse, that the show had built CJ up as a compelling character only to use her as a victim of Mordecai's inability to commit, that Margaret's role in the kiss was predatory, that she had inserted herself back into Mordecai's life knowing he was in a relationship, that she was deliberately showing CJ that she could take Mordecai whenever she wanted. Other fans pushed back. They argued that the kiss happened because Mordecai and Margaret genuinely loved each other, that love does not follow convenient timelines, that the messiness of the situation was the point. They argued that CJ was not a victim because she was a person making her own choices, that she should have recognized the signs earlier, that the jealousy she had already displayed was a warning sign about the relationship's viability. None of this was resolved. The episode ended with the damage done and no path forward. And the love triangle, now fully detonated, would hang over the rest of Season 6 like a storm cloud that refused to break. The show had taken a romantic subplot, something that viewers found comforting and sweet in the early seasons, and turned it into a source of genuine emotional distress for the audience. Fans who had watched Mordecai fumble with Margaret for years now watched him fumble with CJ's feelings, and the fumbling was not cute anymore. It was cruel. The show had grown up, but it had grown up in a direction that made its audience uncomfortable. The comedy was gone from the romance. What was left was the kind of messy, hurtful, nobody-comes-out-clean reality of actual relationships, and that was not what people wanted from a cartoon about a blue jay. But the show was not done. The worst was still coming, and it would arrive at a wedding. The episode is called Dumped at the Altar. It is the 28th episode of Season 6. It aired in 2015. The setup is one of the most anticipated events in the show's history. Muscle Man, the green-skinned park worker, famous for his "my mom" jokes and his surprising emotional depth, is marrying Starla, his longtime girlfriend. The entire cast is present. The tone is celebratory. It is a wedding episode, the kind of episode that typically serves as a highlight of any animated series, a chance for the ensemble to come together, for long-running emotional arcs to pay off, for the audience to feel the warmth of a community gathered for a joyful purpose. And Mordecai ruins it. During the wedding, Mordecai reads a letter from Muscle Man's deceased father, Muscle Dad. The letter's contents trigger something in Mordecai. He stands up. He gives a speech. Not a toast. Not a celebration of the happy couple. A speech about his own relationship issues. About how he has not been honest with himself or others. About how he does not know who his soulmate is. He starts to tell CJ something. The implication, confirmed later by the show's creators, is that he was going to break up with her at someone else's wedding. In front of everyone, CJ cuts him off. She does not let him finish. She runs out crying. She gives him back the charm bracelet he bought her. She tells him, through tears, that she is heartbroken that he said he did not know who his soulmate was. They have a quiet conversation later, a hug, a goodbye. They decide to go on a break, but the word of the show's creative team was clear. Matt Price, the head writer, confirmed that Mordecai intended to break up with CJ. And CJ did not just break things off with Mordecai. She cut all ties with Mordecai, Rigby, Margaret, and Eileen. She removed herself entirely from the social group. The damage was total. The fan reaction to "dumped at the altar" was not just anger. It was a fundamental reassessment of Mordecai as a character. The word that kept appearing in fan discussions, across Reddit, across Tumblr, across Twitter, across every platform where regular show was discussed, was selfish. Mordecai had taken someone else's wedding, a day that belonged to Muscle Man and Starla, and made it about himself. He had humiliated CJ publicly. He had not even had the decency to break up with her privately, in a conversation where she could have responded with dignity. He had chosen the worst possible moment, the most public possible setting, and he had not even had the courage to finish what he started. Fans who had defended Mordecai through the kiss at the Christmas party could not defend this. The goodwill was gone. A character who had been the relatable, lovable protagonist of the show for 6 seasons was now, in the eyes of a significant portion of the fan base, a coward, an emotional wrecking ball, a person who left destruction in his wake not because he was malicious, but because he was too weak to make decisions and too selfish to consider the consequences of his indecision on the people around him. The word simp was not yet in wide circulation when "Dumped at the Altar" aired, but when the internet vernacular caught up, Mordecai was retroactively crowned as one of animation's most prominent examples. His entire romantic arc, from Margaret to CJ and back again, was reframed through this lens. He was not unlucky in love. He was not navigating the complexity of human emotions. He was a character who defined himself entirely through his romantic relationships, who could not function as an individual without a woman to orbit around, who treated the women in his life as interchangeable objects of fixation rather than people with their own needs and boundaries. This is a harsh reading. It is not the only reading, but it is the reading that came to dominate the discourse, and it fundamentally changed how a generation of fans understood the show's protagonist. A quick reminder, if you have not subscribed yet, now is a great time. It helps more than you might think. There is a version of this story where the love triangle ends and the show moves on, where Mordecai grows up, the wounds heal, and the final seasons course correct. And in some ways, that is what happened. But the way it happened created its own controversy, because the show did not resolve the love triangle by choosing Margaret or CJ. It did not give the fans the satisfaction of a definitive answer. It chose a third option that nobody saw coming and that many fans did not want. In the series finale, a regular epic final battle, which aired on January 16, 2017, the show jumps forward in time. Mordecai has left the park. He has become a painter. He has finally pursued the artistic career that the show hinted at throughout its run. And at an art show, he meets someone, a woman, a bat. Her name is Steph. Steph is not Margaret. Steph is not CJ. Steph is a character who appears in the finale and nowhere else. She has no arc. She has no history. She has no relationship with any of the other characters. She is, in the most literal sense, a stranger. And Mordecai marries her. They have children together. The flash forward shows them happy, settled, domestic. The love triangle that consumed 3 seasons of the show, that split the fan base, that turned Mordecai into a villain in his own story, is resolved by being abandoned entirely. Head writer Matt Price explained the decision in interviews after the finale aired. He said that the creative team felt the Margaret and CJ stories were complete. Both characters were on their own paths already. Mordecai had moved on in his life. He had finally left the park to pursue art, and the writers thought it would be meaningful if he met someone while doing that. Someone new. Someone from the next chapter, not the previous one. Owen Dennis, another member of the creative team, offered an even more pointed defense. He said he appreciated the show's approach to relationships because he did not want media aimed at kids teaching them that you end up with your first love. In reality, dating is complicated and messy. People move on. People grow apart. The idea that Mordecai would end up with Margaret, the first girl he liked, or CJ, the rebound who became something real, felt too neat for a show that had always been willing to be messy. The reasoning is sound. The execution is what divided people. Fans who had invested in Margaret felt cheated. They had watched 5 seasons of slow-burn romance, only to have it dismissed as a phase. Fans who had invested in CJ felt doubly cheated. They had watched Margaret leave, watched CJ become a compelling character in her own right, watched her get hurt repeatedly, and then watched the show say that none of it mattered because Mordecai was going to end up with someone the audience had never met. And fans who did not care about the love triangle at all, who watched regular show for the comedy, the surrealism, the friendship between Mordecai and Rigby, felt validated. The love triangle had been the show's weakest element, they argued, a distraction from what made regular show great. The fact that it was resolved by being discarded was the most regular show thing the writers could have done. It was a deliberate subversion of the expectation that romantic storylines need to be resolved in satisfying ways. It was the show saying that sometimes you do not end up with the girl from the coffee shop or the girl from the cloud. Sometimes you end up with someone you have not met yet, and that is okay. The Steph controversy is unique among regular shows' many controversies because it has no clear right side. Every position is defensible. Every position is frustrating. The people who hate the ending can point to real failures in storytelling. The people who love it can point to real insights about life. And the people who are indifferent can point to the fact that a cartoon about magical park workers probably should not have been carrying this much romantic baggage in the first place. But the love triangle and its aftermath were not the only source of fan division in regular show's later seasons. Because while Mordecai was busy breaking hearts, the show was making another choice that would polarize its audience in a completely different way. It was leaving the park. It was going to space. And not everyone wanted to follow. The transition began with Rigby's Graduation Day special, the Season 7 finale, which aired on June 30th, 2016. This was the first season finale to be a half-hour special, and it carried an enormous amount of narrative weight. On the surface, it was about Rigby graduating high school, the culmination of his GED arc, a moment of genuine triumph for a character who had spent the entire series being defined by his failures. Rigby was selected to give a speech on a program called Inspire America. He had done the work. He had earned this. And the show treated his graduation with the sincerity it deserved. But underneath the graduation story, something else was happening. The park workers discovered that a months-long dome experiment they had been participating in was not what it seemed. The dome was real. The purpose was not research. And in the episode's final minutes, the park, the literal physical park, was launched into space. The dome sealed. The ground fell away. And suddenly, Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Skips, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost, Pops, and Eileen, who had been in the house during the launch and emerged holding a banana souffle that deflated in the zero gravity, were floating above the Earth with no way home. The last image of the Season 7 finale is a dandelion seed drifting away into the void of space. It is beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The park, the setting that had been the show's constant for 7 seasons, was gone. Not destroyed, relocated, taken from its context and placed somewhere it was never meant to be, and the audience had to decide whether they wanted to follow. Season 8 of Regular Show, which premiered on September 26, 2016, was promoted under a new title, Regular Show in Space. The premise picked up from the Season 7 finale, in which the park, the literal geographic location that had served as the show's setting for 7 years, was launched into space. Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Skips, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost, Pops, and the rest of the ensemble were now floating through the cosmos, dealing with alien threats, navigating interstellar politics, and trying to survive in an environment that was about as far from a municipal park as you could possibly get. The decision to set the final season in space was a creative gamble. On one hand, it gave the show a narrative urgency it had lacked in recent seasons. The stakes were higher. The threats were existential. The story became serialized in a way that regular show had never been before, with each episode building toward the confrontation between Pops and his cosmic opposite, Anti-Pops. The mythology of the show, which had been hinted at in earlier seasons but never fully explored, was finally placed front and center. Pops was revealed to be a cosmic being whose real name is Megacranus, born on a planet called Lollyland. Anti-Pops, whose real name is Malum Cranus and who was voiced by horror legend Robert Englund, was created as his opposite, a being of pure destruction designed to maintain cosmic balance by ending the universe in an eternal cycle. On the other hand, everything that defined regular show had been left behind on Earth. The park was what made the show special. The quotidian setting, the mundane jobs, the boring routines that were constantly interrupted by supernatural chaos. That contrast was the engine of the entire series. Take away the park and you take away the ordinariness that made the extraordinariness extraordinary. A cosmic battle in a science fiction setting is just a cosmic battle. A cosmic battle that starts because two guys did not want to mow the lawn is regular show. Fans who embraced the space arc appreciated the ambition. They liked seeing the show swing for something bigger. They liked the serialized storytelling. They liked the deeper exploration of Pops' mythology. They liked that the show was willing to change, to evolve, to take risks in its final season rather than coasting on formula. Fans who rejected the space arc felt that the show had lost its identity. They missed the slice-of-life episodes, the small stories about video games and coffee and boredom. They felt that the space setting made the show feel like every other science fiction adventure cartoon, stripping away the specific charm that made regular show unlike anything else on television. They argued that the show's greatest strength was its ability to find the cosmic in the domestic, and that by literally going cosmic, it had traded specificity for spectacle. Both readings are valid. The space arc is a creative choice that reveals something important about how shows end. Every long-running series faces the same dilemma in its final season. Do you give the audience more of what they love, risking stagnation, or do you push toward something new, risking alienation? Regular show chose to push. Some viewers were grateful, others were not. But whatever anyone thought about the space setting, whatever anyone thought about the serialized storytelling, whatever anyone thought about Anti-Pops and Megacranus and the mythology of cosmic balance, none of it prepared the audience for what happened in the final episode. Pops died. Let that sit for a moment. The character's full name is Megacranus. He is a cosmic being, the embodiment of creation, born on a planet called Lollyland, placed in the care of Mr. Maillard, raised as a sheltered, innocent man who loves butterflies and lollipops and jolly good shows. He is the reason the park exists. He is the reason the characters found each other. He is the axis around which the entire show revolves, even though he spent most of the series hovering at the edges, a comedic figure whose joyful naivety provided contrast to the cynicism and frustration of the other characters. And the show chose to end his story with death, not in a metaphorical way, not in a he ascended to a higher plane way, although the show does soften the blow slightly in its final moments. Pops, the character defined by kindness, by innocence, by an almost pathological inability to see the bad in anyone or anything, realized that the only way to stop the cycle of universal destruction was to embrace his opposite. He flew toward Anti-Pops. He wrapped his arms around him. He poured his emotions into him, years of joy and love and friendship, until both of them were overwhelmed. And then they drifted into the sun of Lollyland, Pops' homeworld, and were consumed by its light. The screen went white. The park crew floated in space, watching. Nobody spoke. At the screening of the finale, fans in the audience audibly gasped. The moment hit with a force that nobody expected, not because the death itself was surprising. The narrative had been building toward sacrifice for the entire season, but because of who was dying. This was Pops. The happiest character in the show, the one who gave out lollipops, the one who called everyone good show, the one whose entire existence was defined by the belief that life was wonderful and people were good and everything would work out. And the show killed him. It killed the optimism. It killed the innocence. It did not flinch from the implications of its own mythology. And then, in the final scene, the show did something remarkable. It cut to what appeared to be an afterlife. Pops, alone, watching his friends on what looked like a television set. The image on the screen was labeled, on a VHS tape, regular show. Pops watched his friends for a moment. He smiled, and then he ejected the tape and said, quietly, "Jolly good show." The David Bowie song Heroes began to play. The credits rolled. The emotional impact of that ending is difficult to overstate. It reframed the entire series. The show was not just a cartoon about a park. It was Pops' story. He had been watching it, in some metaphysical sense, the entire time. The title, Regular Show, was a joke about a show where nothing was regular, but it was also Pops' description of the experience. Jolly good show, regular show, a life worth watching, a life worth remembering. The finale drew 1.33 million viewers for its first part and 1.37 million viewers for its second, making it the most watched episode of the 8th season. It aired as a combined 33-minute special, longer than any standard episode, but shorter than some of the show's most ambitious specials. It had to carry the weight of 8 seasons, over 240 episodes, and 7 years of audience investment. And the flash-forward sequence that follows Pops' sacrifice had to show the audience what that sacrifice bought, what life looked like for these characters after the cosmic threat was resolved. Mordecai becomes a painter. He pursues the artistic career that was denied to him when Rigby hid his acceptance letter all those years ago. He meets Steph, a bat, at an art show. They marry. They have children. The kid who could not talk to girls grows up into a man with a family, doing the work he was always meant to do. Rigby marries Eileen. They have a daughter. The high school dropout and the quiet mole build a life together, a partnership that works because it was built slowly, honestly, without the drama that defined Mordecai's romantic history. Muscleman and Starla are still together, presumably still happy, still loud, still impossibly, stubbornly in love, and the park is rebuilt, not in space, on Earth, where it belongs. The final scene before the Pops coda shows Mordecai and Rigby, now in their 50s, sitting on a park bench. They are older, they are changed, but they are together. They are still friends. After everything, after the betrayal of the acceptance letter, after the years of slacking and fighting and nearly destroying each other, they are sitting on a bench and remembering the man who saved everything. The fan reaction to the finale was overwhelmingly positive, but it was not universally so. Some fans felt that the death was too dark for a show that had built its identity on comedic absurdism. They argued that Pops deserved a happy ending, not a sacrificial one. Others felt that the flash forward to middle-aged Mordecai and Rigby was too melancholy, that seeing the characters old and changed and separated from each other was painful in a way that a final episode should not be. And some fans simply could not reconcile the emotional weight of the ending with the show they had watched for years. Regular show was supposed to be funny. It was supposed to be silly. It was supposed to be two guys at a park getting into trouble. The finale was something else entirely. It was a meditation on mortality, on sacrifice, on the way that loss defines us, even when the loss is of someone who believed, until the very end, that the world was good. If this is the kind of content you enjoy, subscribing helps us keep making it. The controversies we have discussed so far have been about content, about what the show contained, what it depicted, what it made audiences feel. But there is another category of regular show controversy that exists entirely outside the episodes themselves, in the relationship between the show and its network, between the creators and the system that broadcast their work, between the art and the commerce that surrounded it. Cartoon Network's handling of regular show during its later seasons became a source of frustration for fans and, reportedly, for the creative team as well. The network's scheduling decisions, the way episodes were promoted or buried, the broader shift in Cartoon Network's programming strategy during the mid-2010s, all of these factors shaped how the show was received in its final years. By season 7 and 8, Cartoon Network had shifted its programming emphasis. The era of the early 2010s, when regular show, Adventure Time, and other creator-driven animated series were the flagships of the network, was giving way to a different approach. Teen Titans Go, a comedy-focused reboot of the beloved Teen Titans series, was receiving the majority of Cartoon Network's airtime. Original series were being given shorter seasons and less prominent time slots. The fandom's perception, whether entirely accurate or not, was that Cartoon Network was deprioritizing the shows that had built the network's reputation in favor of cheaper, more easily replicable content. Regular show was not immune to this shift. The final season aired with less promotion than earlier seasons. The transition to the space setting, which was a significant creative gamble, received minimal marketing support. Fans who were not actively following the show's production news could easily have missed the fact that the final season was airing at all. This is not a controversy in the traditional sense. No one was sued, no episodes were banned, but the fan frustration was real and deeply felt. Consider what it means to be a fan of a show in its final season, to know that the end is coming, to want to experience it fully and communally, and to discover that the network that airs the show does not seem to care as much as you do. That disconnect between the audience's emotional investment and the network's business priorities is a wound that has never fully healed in the regular show fandom. The perception that Cartoon Network was abandoning its best shows, letting them finish their runs without the support they deserved, became a running grievance in animation fan communities that extended well beyond regular show. Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and other creator-driven shows experienced similar treatment. The phrase, "Cartoon Network is dead," became a recurring lament, not because the network stopped airing content, but because the content it chose to prioritize no longer reflected the creative ambition that had defined its golden age. Regular show's quiet ending, its relatively modest viewership in the final season compared to its peak, was seen not as a failure of the show, but as a failure of the network. At its height, regular show commanded over 2 million viewers per episode. By the final season, that number had decreased significantly. The reasons were complex. The shift to a space setting alienated some viewers. The serialized storytelling required a commitment that casual viewers were not willing to make. But the scheduling was a factor too. When a network buries a show in an unpromoted time slot, the show does not disappear because people stopped caring. It disappears because people stopped finding it. The finale drew 1.33 million viewers for its first part and 1.37 million for its second, making it the most watched episode of the final season, but a fraction of the viewership the show had commanded at its height. For a show that ran for 8 seasons and produced over 240 episodes, for a show that won Emmy Awards and generated millions of dollars in merchandise and inspired an entire generation of animators, those numbers feel small. They feel like a show that was allowed to end quietly, rather than celebrated for what it achieved. And then, for 9 years, regular show was over. The park was closed. The characters were retired. The show lived on in streaming libraries and YouTube compilations and fan discussions, but no new content was produced. Those 9 years were not static. The show's absence created its own kind of presence. Regular show clips on YouTube accumulated hundreds of millions of views. Full episodes were uploaded, taken down, re-uploaded, taken down again. Fan edits and compilations circulated endlessly. The show's memes continued to evolve and spread, detached from their original context, carrying the emotional DNA of regular show into corners of the internet that had never seen a full episode. And the audience aged. The children who watched the premiere in 2010 became adults. They went to college, they got jobs, they entered relationships, they experienced, in their own lives, the things that regular show had been talking about all along. They understood Mordecai's romantic failures because they had their own. They understood Benson's frustration because they had their own bosses. They understood Rigby's insecurity because they had their own regrets about opportunities missed and paths not taken. The show, preserved in amber on streaming platforms, became a time capsule that these viewers could return to. And each time they returned, they saw something different. They saw the show they remembered, but they also saw the show they had not been old enough to understand the first time. This is the privilege of rewatching something you grew up with. You do not see the same show. You see the same show through different eyes. The jokes are the same, but your capacity to understand them has changed. The emotional moments are the same, but your capacity to feel them has deepened. Regular show rewards rewatching because it was always a show with more depth than a single viewing could reveal. The "my mom" jokes are still funny. But now you also notice the way Muscle Man's voice cracks when he talks about his father. The love triangle is still frustrating, But now you also recognize the specific kind of paralysis that comes from wanting two things equally and knowing you can only have one. Pops's death is still devastating, but now you understand it differently, because you have, in the intervening years, lost people of your own. This is why the revival mattered. This is why, when the announcement came, the reaction was so intense. Regular show, The Lost Tapes, premiered on May 11, 2026, on Cartoon Network. The revival was announced with considerable fanfare, and J.G. Quintel returned as the creative force behind the project. The original voice cast reunited. The animation style was preserved. The tone was intended to match the original series. The fan reaction was complex. There was excitement, certainly. The prospect of new regular show content after nearly a decade was thrilling for fans who had grown up with the show and were now in their 20s and 30s. But there was also apprehension. Revival anxiety, the fear that a beloved show will return in a diminished form, is a well-documented phenomenon in fan communities. The list of shows that came back worse than they left is long, and regular show fans were acutely aware of the risks. Early reviews were mixed. Some critics described the revival as faithful but unambitious, arguing that while the show recreated the tone, aesthetic, and narrative approach of the original, it did not offer anything that rewatching the original would not provide. The criticism was not that the revival was bad, it was that it was redundant. It was regular show, perfectly preserved, without the urgency or freshness that made the original feel alive. These reviews raised a question that applies to every revival, every reboot, every sequel to a beloved property. Is faithfulness enough? When a show returns, does it owe the audience something new, or is the act of returning itself sufficient? Other viewers disagreed, and their disagreement was passionate. They argued that faithfulness to the original was exactly what they wanted. That the comfort of returning to the park, of hearing those voices again, of watching Mordecai and Rigby get into trouble in the same old ways, was the entire point. That a revival does not need to reinvent the wheel. That sometimes the wheel is fine. That sometimes, after 9 years of absence, after the audience has grown up and the world has changed and everything feels faster and louder and more uncertain, what a person needs is not innovation but familiarity. What a person needs is a park, two friends, a gumball machine yelling, a lollipop man laughing, a Yeti skipping, the same show, the same jokes, the same world, preserved and returned, a gift from the past to the present. This tension between innovation and comfort defines the revival discourse and, in a larger sense, defines the entire relationship between regular show and its audience. The show was always pushing forward. It was always changing, from episodic to serialized, from domestic to cosmic, from comedy to tragedy. And the audience, even as they followed, always looked back. They looked back to the early seasons, to the simplicity, to the park before it launched into space, to the characters before they changed in ways that could not be unchanged. The nostalgia the show depicted, the VHS tapes and arcade machines and 1980s aesthetics, mirrored the nostalgia the audience felt for the show itself. Regular show made you nostalgic for regular show while you were still watching it. That is a remarkable and slightly heartbreaking achievement. The Lost Tapes, by returning to the park, by refusing to push forward, was offering the audience the thing they had been nostalgic for. Whether that offering constitutes art or mere comfort food is the question the revival asks but does not answer. And perhaps it does not need to. Perhaps the offering itself is enough. And Billy Mitchell, the man who had sued Cartoon Network over the Garrett Bobby Ferguson character more than a decade earlier, took to social media once again to express his displeasure. The Lost Tapes apparently gave him fresh ammunition, though the specifics of his objections were more personal than legal. The lawsuit had been dismissed. The legal battle was over, but the emotional battle, it seemed, never quite ended. The Lost Tapes controversy is ongoing. As of this recording, the revival is still airing, and the fan discourse is still evolving. Whether it will be remembered as a worthy continuation or an unnecessary appendage will depend on how the remaining episodes unfold and how time treats the project. But the fact that it exists at all is a testament to how deeply regular show embedded itself in the culture. Shows do not get revived because they were adequate. They get revived because people miss them. There is another dimension to the revival controversy that deserves attention. Regular show, The Lost Tapes, was described as a prequel of sorts, set before the events of the original series, but designed to coexist with the established canon. Screen Rant reported that the spin-off was set to rewrite canon, a claim that generated immediate anxiety among fans who feared that the revival would retroactively alter the story they knew and loved. This is a specific kind of fan fear, the fear of retroactive continuity, of having your memories of a show changed by new information that was never part of the original plan. Whether The Lost Tapes ultimately rewrites canon in meaningful ways or simply fills in gaps remains to be seen, but the anxiety itself is telling. It reveals how protective fans are of regular show's legacy. They do not just remember the show, they guard it. They feel ownership over it, and any perceived threat to the version of the show that lives in their memory is treated as a threat to the memories themselves. This protectiveness is not irrational. When you grow up with a show, the show becomes part of you in ways that are difficult to articulate. The episodes you watched on sick days home from school, the jokes you repeated with your friends, the characters whose struggles mirrored your own in ways you did not fully understand at the time. These are not intellectual experiences. They are emotional anchors. And when a revival threatens to change those anchors, even slightly, the resistance is visceral. Let us pull back from the specific controversies and talk about something broader. Let us talk about what it means for a cartoon to grow up alongside its audience, and what happens when the audience grows up faster than the show, or the show grows up faster than the audience. Regular Show premiered in 2010. A child who was 10 years old when the first episode aired was 17 when the last episode aired. A teenager who was 14 at the premiere was 21 at the finale. The show's audience did not stay the same. It could not stay the same, and the show's creators knew this. The evolution of Regular Show across its 8 seasons tracks the maturation of its audience in ways that are sometimes deliberate and sometimes accidental. The early seasons are simpler, the humor is broader, the emotional stakes are lower. Mordecai's crush on Margaret is sweet and uncomplicated. The supernatural escalations are played entirely for comedy. The characters are sketches, defined by a few strong traits, entertaining but not deeply drawn. By the middle seasons, the characters have become people. Rigby's status as a high school dropout, first established in the Season 2 episode More Smarter, evolves into a genuine arc of personal growth. His decision to pursue his GED is motivated by his relationship with Eileen, a character who initially repulsed him but who gradually revealed herself to be the kind, intelligent person who could inspire him to be better. Rigby passed his GED. He got his diploma. He grew up. And his growth was earned, built across seasons of small moments and gradual changes, not rushed or forced. Think about who was watching when Rigby decided to go back to school. Think about the viewers who were themselves facing decisions about their education, their careers, their futures. Think about what it meant to see a character who was defined by laziness and irresponsibility choose, slowly and imperfectly, to take responsibility for himself. That is not a controversial storyline, but it is a storyline that only works because the show had the time and the willingness to let a character change at a realistic pace. Benson's anger, too, evolved across the series in ways that invited debate. In the early seasons, Benson's rage at Mordecai and Rigby is played as a recurring gag. He screams. He turns red. He threatens to fire them. The audience laughs because the anger is disproportionate to the offense. 2 guys slacking off at a park does not warrant the volcanic fury that Benson brings to every interaction. But as the show progresses, the anger becomes something else. Think Positive, a Season 3 episode, forces Benson to bottle up his rage after Pops bans him from yelling. The results are catastrophic. Benson's suppressed anger becomes so dense that it begins to disintegrate the park around him. When he finally releases it, the explosion leaves a crater and temporarily deafens Mordecai and Rigby. The episode is played for comedy, but the subtext is unmistakable. Benson's anger is not a personality quirk. It is a condition. It is what happens when a person who cares deeply about doing his job well is surrounded by people who do not care at all, and when the system he works within provides no healthy outlet for his frustration. Fan discussions about Benson split along predictable lines. Some fans argued that Benson was a bully. that his treatment of Mordecai and Rigby constituted workplace harassment, that his constant threats of firing were abusive, regardless of how much the two of them deserved it. Other fans argued that Benson was the only reasonable person in the entire show, that Mordecai and Rigby's slacking endangered the park, that Benson's anger was not just justified but restrained given the level of chaos they caused on a daily basis. The truth, as with most things in regular show, is somewhere in the gap between those two readings. Benson is both the bully and the victim. He is both the authority figure abusing his power and the responsible adult being driven to madness by irresponsible subordinates. The show never resolves this tension. It lets it exist, and that ambiguity is part of what makes Benson one of the most interesting characters in modern animation. There is a scene in Think Positive where Benson, having been ordered by Pops not to yell, sits at his desk and physically shakes from the effort of containing himself. His body vibrates. The objects on his desk rattle. The gumballs inside him, the ones that make up his literal body, clatter against his glass exterior. The show holds on this image. It does not cut to Mordecai and Rigby for a reaction shot. It does not add a joke to undercut the tension. It just watches a man trying not to explode, and it asks you to consider what it costs him to maintain control. That scene is 11 seconds long. In those 11 seconds, regular show does something that most workplace comedies never attempt. It shows you the interior experience of being a manager, not the power, not the authority. The strain, the constant grinding effort of being responsible for other people's failures while having no control over their behavior. Benson yells because yelling is the only release valve he has, and when the release valve is removed, the pressure does not go away. It builds, and it builds, and it builds, until the park itself cannot contain it. This is why the Benson debate is not really about Benson. It is about work. It is about the fundamental question of whether the systems we build to organize labor are humane, whether the people at the top are oppressors or captives, whether the people at the bottom are victims or free agents. Regular show does not answer this question. It dramatizes it, and the dramatization is more honest than any answer could be. High Five Ghost and his place in the ensemble deserves mention here, because the controversy around High Five Ghost is the controversy of absence. He is a main character who rarely gets main character treatment. He is present in nearly every episode but central to almost none. He floats in the background. He reacts to other people's jokes. He exists, in the show's visual language, as a supporting presence rather than a driving force. And fans noticed. The complaint was not that High Five Ghost was a bad character. It was that the show wasted him. That a ghost with the ability to possess objects and fly through walls was given less character development than a goat intern who turned out to be a spy. That the show's ensemble was deep enough to support 8 seasons of storytelling, but not equitable enough to give every member of that ensemble a fair share of the spotlight. The controversy is small, as these things go. Nobody organized protests. Nobody wrote angry letters to Cartoon Network. But the frustration was real, and it pointed to a broader truth about ensemble shows. When you have a large cast, every minute spent on one character is a minute not spent on another. And the characters who get left behind leave fans who feel left behind too. If you are still with us, consider subscribing. It genuinely helps the channel grow. But perhaps the most underappreciated controversy in regular show's history involves a character who was so unremarkable that his unremarkableness became the point. His name is Thomas. Or rather, that was not his name at all. The Real Thomas aired as the 8th episode of Season 6 on November 20th, 2014. Thomas was a goat intern who had joined the park staff in earlier seasons. He was quiet, he was bland. He did not have memorable catchphrases or dramatic storylines. He existed, in the eyes of most viewers, as background filler. The kind of character who rounds out an ensemble without contributing much to it. And then, the Real Thomas revealed that Thomas was a Russian spy. His real name was Nikolai. He had been planted at the park as part of a Russian intelligence operation. His companion, Natalia, was also a spy. The mission involved bringing part of American soil to a Russian missile, bypassing nuclear arms treaties, with the park as the starting point. Let that sit for a second. The episode aired in November 2014. At the time, Russia was supporting separatist forces in eastern Ukraine, a conflict that had begun earlier that year. The geopolitical context was charged, and the real Thomas did not shy away from it. The episode presented Russia as a cartoonish villain, complete with stereotypical accents and absurd military schemes, in a way that felt both intentionally over the top and uncomfortably close to real-world tensions. The fan reaction split cleanly. One group of fans loved the twist. They argued that Thomas had been boring as a regular character, and that the spy reveal made him infinitely more interesting. The episode earned one of the highest ratings on IMDb of any episode in the series, suggesting that a significant majority of viewers found it entertaining. The absurdity of the plot, a Russian spy infiltrating a municipal park, was peak regular show. It was the kind of escalation the show was built for. But another group of fans objected. Some felt that the twist was lazy, a cheap shock that sacrificed a character's established identity for a momentary surprise. Others felt that the political overtones were inappropriate for a children's cartoon, that using real-world geopolitical tensions as the basis for a comedy episode trivialized serious events. And still others simply liked Thomas as a character, found the spy reveal unsatisfying, and wished the writers had instead invested that creative energy into making Thomas a more interesting part of the ensemble through conventional character development. The episode became significantly more controversial in hindsight. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the real Thomas was re-examined through a much harsher lens. What had seemed like harmless Cold War pastiche in 2014 now felt like a show that had, perhaps accidentally, anticipated something real. The cartoon Russian villains were no longer figures of fun. They were echoes. The absurd military scheme, stealing America piece by piece, was no longer funny when a real military was attempting to take a real country piece by piece. The episode's comedy became its problem. Not because the comedy was insensitive at the time it was made, but because the world changed around it, and the joke stopped being a joke. This is a specific kind of controversy that only applies to art that endures. A show that is watched once and forgotten never has to contend with the fact that the world it was made in might not be the world it is watched in. But regular show endures. People watch The Real Thomas in 2022, and in 2024, and in 2026, and each time they watch it, the geopolitical context has shifted. The episode has not changed. The world has. And the gap between what the episode meant when it was made and what it means when it is watched is a gap that widens with every year. This is true of all art, but it is especially true of animated shows that are available on streaming platforms in perpetuity. These shows are not broadcast once and archived. They are permanently accessible, permanently rewatchable, permanently subject to reinterpretation by audiences whose experiences and contexts the creators could never have anticipated. Regular show was made in a world before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, before the pandemic, before the seismic shifts in online culture that reshaped how people talk about entertainment. But it is watched in a world after all of those things. And the controversies that seemed settled at the time of broadcast are reopened by every new viewer who brings a new context to the same old episodes. The cartoonish Russian villains were no longer as funny when actual Russian military forces were destroying actual Ukrainian cities. The episode did not cause harm. It did not influence policy. But it occupied a new space in the cultural conversation, a reminder that comedic depictions of real-world conflicts do not age in predictable ways. Nikolai, for his part, ultimately double-crossed the Russian government to save his friends. He went into hiding. The show treated his arc with surprising seriousness, acknowledging that the spy reveal was not just a twist but a transformation. Thomas the bland intern was gone. Nikolai the conflicted agent took his place, and the fans who stuck with the show after the reveal found a more interesting character waiting on the other side. And if you have not already, subscribing is one of the best ways to support what we do here. There is a thread running through all of these controversies that we have not named directly yet. It is the thread that connects the acid trip origins to the international censorship, to the love triangle, to the space arc, to the finale. It is the thread that explains why regular show generated more passionate debate than most cartoons of its era, why fans cared so much about every creative decision, why the show's choices felt personal in a way that a simple entertainment product should not. The thread is this. Regular Show was a show about growing up that was watched by people who were growing up. And growing up is, by its nature, controversial. Every major controversy we have discussed maps onto a stage of maturation. The adult content controversy is about the discovery that the things you loved as a child were more complicated than you understood. The censorship controversy is about the realization that the rules you grew up with are not universal, that different cultures protect childhood differently, and that protection itself is a contested concept. The love triangle controversy is about the experience of watching someone you care about make terrible romantic decisions and being unable to stop them, which is precisely the experience of being a friend to another human being in your late teens and early 20s. The space art controversy is about the fear that change means loss, that growing means leaving behind the places and routines that defined you. And the finale controversy is about mortality, about the fact that the people who made your life beautiful will not be there forever, and that the only appropriate response to that fact is to remember them and to say, as Pops said, "Jolly good show." This is why the controversies mattered, not because they were scandals. Regular Show never had a real scandal. Nobody was fired. Nobody was arrested. Nobody said something irredeemable in an interview. The controversies were debates. They were arguments about what a cartoon is allowed to be, who a cartoon is allowed to hurt, and what happens when a cartoon treats its audience with enough respect to tell them the truth about how life works. The show told the truth about friendship. Mordecai and Rigby's relationship is not a simple buddy comedy. It is a portrait of a codependent friendship between two people who are not equally talented, not equally motivated, and not equally mature. Mordecai resents Rigby's laziness. Rigby resents Mordecai's superiority. They hurt each other constantly. They forgive each other constantly. They cannot function without each other. That is not a heartwarming message. That is an honest one. The show told the truth about work. The park is not a fun place to work. Benson is stressed. Skips is tired. Muscle Man uses humor to deflect from deep insecurities. Hi, Five Ghost is invisible to most of the people around him. The park is a workplace like any other, filled with people who are trying their best and failing regularly, who show up every day not because they are passionate about groundskeeping, but because they need the job and the job needs them. The show never romanticizes work. It never suggests that the characters are lucky to be there. It acknowledges, quietly and consistently, that most people spend most of their lives doing things they did not choose, in places they did not pick, with people they did not select, and that this is not a tragedy. It is just life. The show told the truth about loss. Characters leave. Characters die. Characters change so much that the person they were at the beginning is unrecognizable by the end. Thomas becomes Nikolai. Rigby becomes a student. Margaret becomes a memory. CJ becomes a cautionary tale. And Pops, the sweetest soul in the show, becomes a sacrifice. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is safe. The show never lies about this, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when the audience would prefer the comfort of stasis. And the show told the truth about nostalgia. This is perhaps the most controversial truth of all. Regular Show is a show saturated in nostalgia. The music, the VHS tapes, the arcade games, the aesthetic of the 1980s and 1990s, filtered through the lens of the 2010s. The show loves the past, but it does not live there. It does not pretend that the past was better. It does not suggest that the solution to present problems is to return to a previous era. It acknowledges that nostalgia is beautiful, and that nostalgia is a trap, that remembering is important, and that remembering is not the same as living. That a VHS tape labeled Regular Show is a lovely thing to watch in the afterlife, but the life itself is what mattered. The fans who loved Regular Show loved it because it told these truths. The fans who fought about Regular Show fought because the truths were uncomfortable. And the fans who grew up with Regular Show grew up because the show showed them what growing up looks like. And growing up looks like losing things you care about and finding new things to care about and never quite being sure if the trade was worth it. Let us talk about one more controversy. One that is smaller than the others, more contained, but that reveals something essential about the relationship between a show and its audience. Muscle Man's humor. Mitch Muscle Man Sorenstein is, by any standard, one of the most divisive characters in Regular Show. He is crude. He is loud, he is aggressive. His signature joke, the "my mom" joke, is a variation on the classic "your mom" insult, except that Muscle Man directs the joke at his own mother, rather than the listeners. You know who else likes to get up early in the morning? My mom. You know who else has a great weekend planned? My mom. The joke is the same every time. The structure never varies. The punchline is always "my mom." And the fans had strong opinions. Some viewers found Muscle Man unbearable. His humor was repetitive. His personality was abrasive. His presence in episodes dragged down the pacing. They argued that the "my mom" joke was not funny the first time and became actively annoying by the 50th. They pointed to episodes where Muscle Man's behavior crossed the line from obnoxious to cruel, where his pranks on his co-workers were not harmless but genuinely mean-spirited. They wanted less of him. They wanted the show to focus on Mordecai and Rigby and the characters who had more range. Other viewers argued that Muscle Man was the heart of the show, that beneath the crude exterior was a character capable of surprising emotional depth, that his relationship with Starla was one of the most genuine love stories in the series, that his loyalty to his friends was absolute and unwavering, that the "my mom" joke was not supposed to be funny in a sophisticated way. It was funny because it was stupid, and the show knew it was stupid, and Muscle Man knew it was stupid, and the commitment to stupidity was the joke. They pointed to Last Meal, to Trucker Hall of Fame, to Muscle Woman, to any number of episodes where Muscle Man was given the space to be more than a punchline and rose to the occasion. The Muscle Man debate is, in miniature, the entire debate about regular shows' humor. Is the show smart or dumb? Is the crude humor a mask for deeper intelligence or a crutch that undermines it? Is the show aimed at children or adults? Is the lowbrow comedy an invitation or an exclusion? These questions never get definitive answers because the show itself never definitively answers them. Regular show is smart and dumb simultaneously. It is crude and profound in the same scene. It is a show that will make a "my mom" joke and then, 3 minutes later, deliver a scene of genuine emotional devastation. The tonal whiplash is not a flaw. It is the show, and the fans who could ride that whiplash, who could laugh at "my mom" and cry at Pops's death, and accept that both of those responses were valid reactions to the same show, those fans understood regular show better than anyone. They understood that the controversy was the point, that a show called Regular Show was never going to be regular, that the gap between what it appeared to be and what it actually was, that was the whole game. There is an aspect of the Muscle Man debate that connects to the broader controversy about censorship we discussed earlier. The "my mom" joke operates on a specific mechanism. Muscle Man asks a setup question, "You know who else likes to mundane activity?" and delivers the punchline, "my mom." The joke is structured identically to a "your mom" insult, except the target is his own mother. This inversion is the joke. Muscle Man is insulting himself, not the listener. He is degrading his own mother, not yours. And the UK censors, unsurprisingly, had opinions about this. One of the most cited examples of UK censorship involves a Muscle Man line that was changed for the British broadcast. In the original American version, Muscle Man says, "You know who else likes to polish other people's rocks?" The sexual innuendo is clear. In the UK version, the line was changed to reference petrology, the study of rocks. The joke was preserved in structure but neutered in content. The innuendo was replaced with an educational reference, and the result was a joke that was technically the same, but emotionally unrecognizable. This is the censorship problem in miniature. You can change the words, you can alter the animation, you can redub the dialogue and reframe the shots, but you cannot change the show. The show is not its words. The show is the space between its words. The show is the pause before the punchline, the look on a character's face, the specific rhythm of a joke delivered by a voice actor who understands exactly what the line is actually about. You can censor regular show down to nothing, strip every innuendo, remove every reference to death, replace every borderline word with a safer alternative. And what you will have is not a censored version of regular show. It is a different show entirely. A show that looks the same but feels different. A show that has been emptied of the specific quality that made it matter. That is the real controversy of regular show's international censorship. It is not about individual words or individual scenes. It is about the cumulative effect of hundreds of small changes on a show whose power comes from the gap between what it appears to be and what it actually is. When you close that gap, when you make the show exactly what it appears to be, a harmless cartoon about animals at a park, you have not protected children from inappropriate content. You have denied them access to the thing that made the show worth watching: the edge, the ambiguity, the unsettling feeling that this cartoon is talking about something that nobody is supposed to talk about in a cartoon. If you are enjoying the deep dive, subscribing is the single best way to help us keep going. There is a structural controversy we have not addressed directly, and it sits at the heart of everything Regular Show is. It is the escalation formula. Every episode of Regular Show follows approximately the same structure. Mordecai and Rigby are given a task or encounter a mundane problem. They attempt to solve it through the easiest possible means, which usually involves cutting corners, ignoring instructions, or using something they should not be using. The solution backfires. The situation escalates. What started as a problem about cleaning the house becomes a battle against a sentient tornado. What started as a dispute about a video game becomes a confrontation with interdimensional beings. What started as a trip to the coffee shop becomes a chase scene involving a helicopter, a wizard, and a portal to another dimension. This formula is the show. It is not a formula the show uses. It is the show itself. Remove the escalation, and you do not have Regular Show. You have a slice-of-life workplace comedy about two guys at a park. Add the escalation, and you have one of the most distinctive animated shows ever made. The controversy is about whether the escalation ever went too far. Whether the show, in its commitment to always raising the stakes, sometimes lost the thread of what made the mundane parts interesting. There are episodes in the later seasons where the escalation begins almost immediately, where the domestic setup is barely sketched before the cosmic adventure takes over. In these episodes, the contrast that powers the formula is diminished. If the mundane part is too short, the extraordinary part has nothing to bounce off of. The joke only works if you remember that these are two guys who were supposed to be raking leaves. This is a subtle criticism, and it was voiced primarily by the show's most dedicated fans, the ones who loved the early seasons and felt that the later seasons sometimes prioritized spectacle over specificity. They did not want less Regular Show. They wanted more of the regular part, more of the couch, more of the video games, more of the small, quiet, ordinary moments that made the extraordinary moments feel extraordinary. And there is a version of this criticism that applies to the show's overall trajectory. Regular Show started small. Two guys, a park, a talking gumball machine, and it ended with a cosmic battle in space, a universe on the brink of destruction, a character sacrificing himself to save all of existence. The arc of the show is an escalation in itself, a macro version of the episode formula applied across 8 seasons. And some fans wonder whether the show, like its own protagonists, started something it could not control, whether the escalation from mundane to cosmic was inevitable once the formula was established, whether a show built on always going bigger had no choice but to end as big as possible, even if that bigness cost it some of the intimacy that made it special. There is no definitive answer. The escalation formula is what made Regular Show unique, and the escalation formula is what eventually pushed the show away from the qualities that made it lovable. Both things are true, and the tension between them is what makes discussing Regular Show so endlessly fascinating. Regular Show's relationship with internet culture deserves mention here, because the show and the internet grew up together in a way that shaped both. When Regular Show premiered in 2010, YouTube was 5 years old, Twitter was 4 years old, Tumblr was 3 years old, Reddit was 5 years old. The platforms that would come to define how fans interact with media were still relatively new, and Regular Show was one of the first animated shows to have its reception shaped primarily by online discourse rather than traditional media criticism. The memes came first. The "my mom" joke became a meme almost immediately. Mordecai's awkward interactions with Margaret became reaction images. Benson's screaming became a shorthand for workplace frustration. The show's visual style, clean lines, simple character designs, expressive faces, was perfectly suited to the screenshot and share economy of social media. Regular Show became not just a show, but a vocabulary, a set of images and phrases that people used to communicate about their own lives. But the memes were surface level. What happened underneath was more significant. Regular show's controversies played out in real time on platforms that allowed fans to argue directly with each other. The Margaret versus CJ debate was not conducted in the letters column of a magazine or in the break room at school. It was conducted on Reddit threads and Tumblr posts and Twitter replies, in spaces where thousands of people could participate simultaneously, where the arguments were preserved in text, where the emotional temperature of a debate could be measured by the number of notes on a post or the upvote ratio on a comment. This changed the nature of the controversy itself. Previous generations of animated shows had controversies too. Parents complained about The Simpsons. Activists protested South Park. But those controversies were mediated by traditional media. They were filtered through newspaper articles and television segments. The fans experienced the controversy secondhand. With regular show, the fans were the controversy. They were the ones generating the arguments, the ones conducting the debates, the ones creating the evidence that the show mattered. The internet did not report on regular show's controversies. The internet was regular show's controversies. And this had consequences for the show itself. The creators were aware of the online discourse. They could not help but be aware. When thousands of fans argued about Mordecai's romantic choices, those arguments reached the writers' room. When the fandom split over Margaret and CJ, the writers had to navigate that split in real time, knowing that every creative decision would be instantly evaluated, dissected, praised, and condemned by an audience that was no longer passive but actively engaged in shaping the show's reception. Whether the online discourse improved the show or damaged it is itself a controversy. Some argue that the fan pressure pushed the writers to make the love triangle more dramatic than it needed to be, that the Merry Christmas Mordecai kiss and the dumped at the altar wedding speech were products of a creative team that had been pushed by fan expectations into escalating a storyline beyond what it could sustain. Others argue that the fan engagement made the show better, that the knowledge that millions of people cared deeply about these characters inspired the writers to push harder, to dig deeper, to treat their animated show with the seriousness that the audience was already bringing to it. The truth, as always with regular show, is somewhere in the gap. The internet made the controversies bigger. The controversies made the show bigger. And the show, sitting at the center of all of it, continued to be exactly what it had always been. A cartoon about two slackers at a park. A cartoon about growing up. A cartoon that refused to be regular. But before we bring this to a close, there are several more layers to unpack. Because the controversies we have discussed so far, the censorship, the lawsuits, the love triangles, the space arc, the finale, these are the ones that dominated the headlines and the forums. But regular show generated controversy in smaller, quieter ways too. In the spaces between the major events. In the individual episodes that pushed boundaries so specifically that they became flashpoints for debates about what animation is allowed to do. Let us talk about death on regular show. Not Pops's death, not the metaphorical death of innocence, or the thematic death of childhood. Literal death. Characters dying on screen in a cartoon that aired at 4 in the afternoon on a children's network. The Power, the very first episode of regular show, aired on September 6, 2010. In it, Mordecai and Rigby discover a magical keyboard that can make anything happen when they play it and speak a command. They use it to get a raise from Benson. They use it to cover up damage they caused to the house. And then, when they try to use it to send Skips back to his room, Rigby mishears the command, and Skips is sent to the moon. Not metaphorically, the character is launched into space. In the first episode, before the audience even understands the rules of this world, the show establishes that the stakes are real. Characters can be removed from reality with no warning and no safety net. That was a statement of intent, and the show followed through on it with a consistency that became its own controversy. Its Time is the second episode of Season 2. It aired on January 3, 2011. The plot begins simply enough. Mordecai wants to take Margaret to a movie. Rigby, feeling excluded, invites himself along and begins flirting with Margaret specifically to make Mordecai jealous. The tension between the two friends escalates. They argue, they fight, and then, during a surreal sequence involving time travel and a microwave hurtling through a space vortex, Mordecai shoves Rigby off the microwave. Rigby disintegrates, not in a puff of cartoon smoke, not in a comedic way where he reappears in the next scene dusting himself off. He graphically breaks apart. He dies. The show holds on the moment long enough for it to register. Mordecai's best friend is dead, and Mordecai killed him out of jealous rage. The episode resets, as these kinds of episodes do. Time travel undoes the damage. Rigby is alive by the end. But the fan reaction was not focused on the reset. It was focused on the act itself. Mordecai, the protagonist, the character the audience is supposed to identify with, killed his best friend because Rigby flirted with a girl. The discussion that followed split along fault lines that would become familiar over the years to come. Some fans blamed Mordecai for letting his jealousy consume him. Others blamed Rigby for deliberately provoking Mordecai, for inviting Margaret on a date out of spite, for rubbing it in Mordecai's face until the situation became explosive. Both readings are supported by the episode. Neither reading is complete without the other. And this is what makes the episode so uncomfortable. It is not a case of one character being wrong and the other being right. It is a case of two people who love each other bringing out the absolute worst in each other. Mordecai's possessiveness and Rigby's spite feed off each other in a cycle of escalation that ends in death. The fact that the death is undone does not undo the insight. The show showed you what these two characters are capable of when their friendship is pushed past its breaking point. And what they are capable of is destruction. Over the Top, which aired on August 15, 2011, takes this even further. In this episode, Skips, the immortal Yeti who serves as the park's handyman, accidentally kills Rigby during an arm wrestling match. Not in a mystical, ambiguous way. Skips slams Rigby's head into a table with enough force to kill him. Rigby is pronounced dead. Benson, Mordecai, Pops, and Skips stand in a hospital. A doctor delivers the news: Rigby is gone. The rest of the episode follows Skips as he challenges death himself, an actual personified being of death who appears as a recurring character in the show, to an arm wrestling match for Rigby's soul. Skips wins. Rigby comes back. But the opening of that episode, the hospital scene, the pronouncement of death, the grief on the characters' faces, that was not played for laughs. It was played straight, and it aired on Cartoon Network, in the afternoon, for children. This is the episode that was banned in Hungary, Poland, and Romania. The reasons cited were extreme violence, crime, death, and sexual innuendo. In the United Kingdom, the entire hospital opening was cut. The episode was later dubbed in the banned countries and eventually made available, but the initial response from international broadcasters was clear. This episode went too far. And yet, in the United States, it aired without incident. No parent groups organized protests. No sponsors pulled their advertising. No network executive demanded changes. The episode was simply part of the show. Rigby died. Rigby came back. The show moved on. And the audience, many of whom were children, processed a scene depicting the death of a beloved character in a hospital setting and apparently suffered no lasting trauma from the experience. This discrepancy between the American response and the international response is itself a controversy. It raises questions that do not have comfortable answers. Are American children less sensitive to depictions of death, or are American broadcasters less protective? Is the European response an overcorrection, or is the American response an undercorrection? When a cartoon shows a character dying in a hospital, is that inherently harmful to young viewers? Or does the context of the show, its comedic tone, its history of consequence-free supernatural escalation, provide enough of a framework for children to process the content safely? Regular show never answered these questions. It just kept killing Rigby. Rigby dies multiple times across the series. He dies in It's Time. He dies in Over the Top. He dies in other episodes through various supernatural means, always to be resurrected by the end. Death, in regular show, is both permanent and temporary. It is treated with absolute seriousness in the moment and absolute casualness in the aftermath. The show respects death enough to depict it honestly and disrespects death enough to undo it whenever the plot requires. And the tension between those two impulses is one of the most fascinating aspects of the show's relationship with its audience. Children who watched regular show learned that death is scary, that death is real, and that death can be defeated. That is a complicated set of messages. It is arguably a more honest set of messages than most children's media provides, where death either does not exist or is so final and so devastating that it serves as the emotional climax of the entire story. Regular Show found a middle ground. Death exists. Death hurts. And sometimes, if you are brave enough and strong enough, you can arm wrestle death and bring your friend back. That is not realistic, but it is comforting. And comfort, for a child learning about mortality for the first time, is not nothing. If this analysis is something you are finding valuable, a subscription goes a long way. Now let us talk about a different kind of controversy. Not the controversy of what the show depicted, but the controversy of what the show revealed about its characters when it gave them room to be more than archetypes. Let us talk about Escalation. Escalation is a Season 3 episode. It aired on February 27, 2012, and it won the Primetime Creative Arts Emmy Award for Outstanding Short-Format Animated Program at the 64th ceremony, making it one of the most critically acclaimed 11 minutes of animation in the show's history. 7. It is also one of the most emotionally devastating. The premise is simple. Rigby learns about a food challenge at a local restaurant. If you eat an enormous omelet within an hour, you win a trucker hat that says, "I am Escalation." Rigby wants that hat desperately. He attempts the challenge, and he has a severe allergic reaction to the eggs. He falls into a coma. The show does not play this for comedy. Rigby is in a hospital bed. He is unconscious. The doctors are not optimistic, and Mordecai, standing at his best friend's bedside, makes a promise. He will win the hat. He will complete the challenge that Rigby could not, and he will put that hat on Rigby's head. The rest of the episode follows Mordecai's preparation for and attempt at the omelet challenge. He trains, he struggles, he perseveres. And when he finally finishes the omelet, he faces a final test. He must choose the correct hat from a collection presented by a character called the Excellent Knight. He remembers Rigby's description, a trucker's net hat. He chooses correctly. He brings the hat back to the hospital. He places it on Rigby's head, and Rigby wakes up. The controversy here is not about content. The controversy is about what this episode reveals about the Mordecai-Rigby friendship in the context of everything else the show has done. Because this is the same Mordecai who shoved Rigby off a microwave. This is the same Mordecai who will later humiliate CJ at a wedding. This is the same character who is criticized for being selfish, indecisive, and emotionally destructive. And yet here, in Escalation, he is none of those things. He is selfless. He is determined. He is willing to endure physical pain and public humiliation to win a stupid hat for his best friend because his best friend wanted it and his best friend cannot win it himself. The fan debate around Escalation centers on whether this version of Mordecai is the real one. Is the Mordecai who fights for Rigby the true character, with the romantic failures being aberrations? Or is the Mordecai who fails at relationships the true character, with Escalation being a temporary display of virtue that does not reflect his deeper nature? Think about what it means that an 11-minute cartoon about an omelet challenge won an Emmy. Think about what the voters saw in that episode that elevated it above every other short-format animated program that year. What they saw was not just good animation or funny writing. What they saw was a show that understood the specific texture of male friendship, the way that men show love through action rather than words, the way that a stupid gesture, winning a trucker hat for your comatose friend, can carry more emotional weight than any speech or declaration. Mordecai does not tell Rigby he loves him. He eats an omelet for him, and the omelet is the "I love you." This is Regular Show at its most profound, not when it is being obviously profound, not when it is delivering speeches about mortality or sacrifice or the meaning of friendship, but when it is being specific and concrete and silly, and then letting the audience discover the profundity underneath. An omelet, a trucker hat, a hospital room, a promise. Those are the building blocks. The Emmy voters saw what the fans saw, that the building blocks were simple, but the building was extraordinary. The answer, of course, is both. Mordecai is both the friend who would win an omelet challenge for Rigby and the boyfriend who would kiss his ex at a Christmas party. He is both selfless and selfish. He is both brave and cowardly. He is, in other words, a person. And the controversy is not really about Mordecai at all. It is about the audience's desire for characters to be consistent, to be categorizable, to be either good or bad. Regular Show's refusal to let Mordecai be one thing Its insistence that he is multiple contradictory things at once is what makes him controversial, and it is what makes him realistic. The excellent episode also represents a turning point in how the show handles stakes. In the early episodes, the stakes are cosmic but weightless. Characters are launched to the moon or trapped in other dimensions, but the consequences evaporate by the end. In Excellent, the stakes are small but heavy. A coma, a hat, a promise between friends. The weight comes not from the magnitude of the threat, but from the intimacy of the relationship. You care about whether Mordecai finishes the omelet because you care about whether Rigby wakes up. And you care about whether Rigby wakes up because the show has spent 2.5 seasons making you care about these two messy, imperfect, infuriating, lovable characters. This shift in how the show generates emotional investment, from external spectacle to internal connection, is one of the most important developments in its evolution. And it happened in a Season 3 episode about a restaurant challenge. Quietly, without announcement. The show just started mattering more, and nobody quite noticed when it happened. That realism extends to the show's treatment of Skips, the immortal Yeti whose backstory became one of the most emotionally complex stories in the series. Skip's story, which aired in Season 5 in 2014, carries a 9.7 out of 10 on IMDb, making it one of the highest-rated episodes in the show's history. And the reason is not hard to identify. The episode reveals how Skips became immortal and why he changed his name. He was not always called Skips, he was called Walks. He was a young man, centuries ago, who fell in love with a woman named Mona. Mona was the one who suggested he skip instead of walk, a playful, intimate detail that became the foundation of his identity. And then Mona died. She was crushed by falling debris during a battle with a cosmic threat. Walks went to her. The Guardians of Eternal Youth could do nothing. They presented him with the necklace he had given Mona. She was already gone. The Guardians offered Walks immortality. They asked him to choose a new name for his reborn self. And Walks, remembering the woman he loved, remembering her laughter as they skipped around a school 3 times, said one word: Skips. That is the entire story. A man lost the love of his life and chose to carry her memory in every step he takes. He did not name himself Skips as a tribute. He named himself Skips as a wound. Every time he moves the way she taught him, and the movement is simultaneously an act of love and an act of grief. He is immortal, which means the grief never ends. He will skip forever. He will remember forever. He will never get to stop carrying her. The controversy around Skip's story is quiet. It is not about outrage or backlash. It is about the simple fact that a cartoon on Cartoon Network told a story about eternal grief with a sophistication and emotional precision that most live-action prestige dramas never achieve. The controversy is the gap between what the show was expected to be and what it actually was. Nobody expected an episode about the tragic origin of an immortal Yeti to make them cry. Nobody expected a children's cartoon to articulate the specific pain of outliving everyone you love. But Skip's story did both of those things, and the fans who watched it were left grappling with the realization that the show they had been casually enjoying between homework assignments was, in its quieter moments, a work of genuine emotional art. This is part of what made regular show's relationship with its network so complicated. Cartoon Network wanted a hit comedy. J.G. Quintel gave them a hit comedy that was also, intermittently and without warning, a show about loss, about mortality, about the unbearable weight of caring about people who will eventually leave or die, or change into someone you do not recognize. The comedy was real. The laughter was earned. But underneath the laughter, always, was something heavier. And the network's discomfort with that heaviness, their preference for the comedy over the pathos, shaped how the show was promoted, scheduled, and ultimately remembered. There is a lesson in Skip's story that connects to everything we have been discussing about controversy. The lesson is that the things that matter most are the things that cost the most. Skip's immortality is not a gift. It is a sentence. It is the universe's way of saying, you will remember. You will always remember. And the remembering will never get easier. Regular show understood this. The show's controversies were not free. They cost the show viewers. They cost it critical goodwill. They cost it the uncomplicated love that simpler, safer shows enjoy. But the controversies were evidence that the show was doing something that mattered. Safe shows do not generate controversy. Shows that take risks, shows that trust their audiences, shows that choose honesty over comfort, those shows generate controversy. And the controversy is the price they pay for mattering. Regular Show paid that price gladly. 8 seasons. Over 240 episodes, bans in multiple countries, a federal lawsuit, a fandom torn apart by a love triangle, a finale that killed the kindest character. The price was steep, and the show, like skips, kept going. It kept skipping. It carried the weight and it moved forward, and it never asked for sympathy. It just did the work. The domestic censorship of Regular Show in the United States is less dramatic than the international censorship, but arguably more revealing. Cartoon Network, Max, and home media releases all feature censored versions of seasons 1 through 3. The changes are subtle. In the pilot episode The Power, the original broadcast had Rigby saying, "How in the H are we gonna fix this S?" But in the reruns and home media versions, it was replaced with, "How in the heck are we gonna fix this stuff?" The edge was smoothed. The implication was removed. The joke was defanged. What is interesting is that Netflix, when it carried the show, offered the uncensored versions of those early seasons. The same episodes that Cartoon Network retroactively softened were available on Netflix in their original, unedited form. This means that for a period of time, the version of Regular Show available on the show's own network was less authentic than the version available on a competing platform. The original creator's vision was better preserved by a third-party licensor than by the company that produced the show. This is not unique to Regular Show. It is a pattern across the animation industry, where networks commission edgy content, air it, benefit from the ratings, and then retroactively sanitize it when the cultural winds shift. But for Regular Show fans, the discovery that the version they grew up watching on Cartoon Network was not the version that J.G. Quintel made was a small but meaningful betrayal. The show had been altered. Their memories were based on an edited text. The real Regular Show, the version the creators intended, existed somewhere else. If you are still here and still listening, subscribing really does make a difference. Let us talk about Regular Show, the movie, because the movie, which premiered on November 25, 2015 as a television film on Cartoon Network, sits at an interesting intersection of multiple controversies. The movie is a time travel story. It reveals that Mordecai and Rigby, during their high school years, accidentally created a device called a time-nado, a tornado with the ability to travel through space and time. Their former science teacher and volleyball coach, Mr. Ross, was blamed for the incident and sent to prison. Years later, a future version of Mr. Ross weaponizes the time-nado and intends to use it to destroy Earth. The movie also reveals a critical detail about Mordecai and Rigby's past. In high school, Mordecai was accepted to art school, a program he had dreamed of attending. Rigby was not accepted, and in a moment of panic, jealousy, and fear of being left behind, Rigby intercepted Mordecai's acceptance letter. He hid it. He prevented Mordecai from knowing he had been accepted. Mordecai never went to art school. Instead, he ended up at the park, slacking off with Rigby, living a life that was, in some fundamental sense, not the one he was supposed to live. This revelation reframed the entire series. Every episode of Regular Show, every day that Mordecai spent mowing lawns and avoiding Benson's wrath, was built on a lie. Mordecai was at the park because Rigby sabotaged his future. The friendship that the show had spent 5 seasons building was revealed to have a rotten foundation. Rigby did not just fail to support Mordecai. He actively destroyed Mordecai's opportunity for a different life. The fan reaction was divided. Some felt the reveal added devastating depth to the Mordecai-Rigby dynamic, recontextualizing their friendship as a relationship built on guilt and secrets. Rigby's insecurity, his constant need to prove himself, his desperate attachment to Mordecai, all of it made more sense when you understood that he knew, on some level, that he had stolen Mordecai's future. Others felt the reveal was too dark, that it transformed Rigby from a lovable slacker into someone who had committed an act of genuine cruelty against his best friend, and that the show could not recover from the moral weight of that revelation. The movie addresses this. Mordecai finds out about the letter. He is furious. The friendship nearly ends. But ultimately, After the time travel adventure resolves and the world is saved, Mordecai forgives Rigby. Not easily, not without pain, but he forgives him because the alternative, a life without his best friend, is worse than a life built on a lie. Think about what that says about the show's understanding of friendship. Friendship is not pure. Friendship is not built on a foundation of perfect trust and mutual respect. Friendship, regular show argues, is built on the decision to keep showing up, even when the other person has hurt you, even when you know that the relationship is flawed at its core, even when you have every right to walk away. Mordecai forgives Rigby not because what Rigby did was acceptable, but because Mordecai has decided that the friendship matters more than the betrayal. That is not a simple moral. That is not a clean lesson. That is a truth about how adult relationships actually work, delivered in a cartoon about a blue jay and a raccoon. The movie also connects to the broader controversy about Rigby's character arc and his decision to pursue his GED. Knowing that Rigby sabotaged Mordecai's education makes Rigby's own educational journey more meaningful. When Rigby decides to go back to school, he is not just improving himself. He is atoning. He is doing the thing he prevented Mordecai from doing. He is proving, to himself and to the audience, that education matters, that opportunities matter, that the things we destroy can sometimes be rebuilt if we are willing to do the work. Rigby's GED arc, which spans multiple episodes across later seasons, is one of the most quietly powerful storylines in the show. He passes his classes. He gets his diploma. He does it for Eileen, the shy mole who sees something in him that nobody else does. But he also does it for Mordecai, even though Mordecai never asked him to, even though Mordecai forgave him without conditions. Rigby goes back to school because the guilt of what he did is only bearable if he transforms it into action. That is not a kids' show lesson. That is a lesson about accountability and growth that many adults have never learned. There is one more aspect of the movie that generated discussion, and it concerns the movie's format itself. Regular Show, the movie, was a television film, not a theatrical release. It premiered on Cartoon Network on November 25, 2015, as a Thanksgiving special. For a show that had built a loyal and passionate audience, the decision to release the movie as a TV event rather than a theatrical film was debated. Some fans argued that the movie deserved a bigger platform, that Regular Show had earned the prestige of a theatrical run. Others argued that the TV premiere was appropriate, that it kept the movie accessible to the show's core audience, that not everything needs to be elevated to the theatrical level to be valid. The debate was ultimately about what Regular Show was worth, how much space it deserved, how seriously the industry should take it. These are questions that animation as a medium has been fighting about for decades, and Regular Show, by existing at the intersection of children's entertainment and genuinely mature storytelling, forced those questions to the surface every time it did something ambitious. The special episodes of Regular Show deserve their own consideration in this analysis, because they represent the show at its most ambitious and, consequently, its most divisive. Exit 9B, which aired as a Season 4 premiere, was a half-hour special that brought back nearly every villain from the show's history for a massive confrontation. It was a continuity celebration, a reward for dedicated viewers who recognized every callback and every returning face. But it was also a test of the show's format. Could Regular Show, which was built for 11-minute stories, sustain a 30-minute narrative without losing its pacing or its identity? The answer was contested. Fans who loved the specials saw them as the show flexing muscles it did not know it had. They appreciated the scope, the ambition, the willingness to tell bigger stories. Fans who preferred the standard format felt that the specials were overstuffed, that the jokes were stretched thin over the longer runtime, that the pacing suffered. Brilliant Century Duck Crisis Special, a Season 6 half-hour episode that aired on April 9, 2015, took this debate even further. The episode was an elaborate homage to mecha anime, featuring the baby ducks and full-grown geese returning for an epic battle over merchandising rights. It was visually stunning, narratively ambitious, and utterly unlike anything else on Cartoon Network. It also earned a 9.5 out of 10 on IMDb. The special episodes posed a question that the show never definitively answered. Is Regular Show a comedy that occasionally becomes an epic, or an epic that disguises itself as a comedy? The early seasons suggest the former. The later seasons suggest the latter. And the tension between those two identities, the comedy and the epic, the 11 minutes and the 30 minutes, the park and the cosmos, that tension is the engine that drives every controversy we have discussed. Now let us examine something that rarely gets discussed in regular show controversy retrospectives, but that deserves attention: the show's relationship with its own mythology, and the controversy that erupted when the mythology started demanding more space than the comedy. Regular Show was, for its first 5 seasons, an episodic show. Individual episodes told self-contained stories. There were recurring characters and running gags, but you could watch any episode in isolation and understand what was happening. The mythology, the cosmic forces, the supernatural beings, the deeper lore about Pops and Skips and the park itself existed at the margins. It added texture without demanding attention. Starting in season 6, that changed. The show became more serialized. The love triangle required continuity. The Thomas reveal required setup and payoff. And by season 8, the show was fully committed to a season-long narrative arc about Pops, anti-Pops, and the cosmic cycle of creation and destruction. This shift was controversial for a reason that gets to the heart of what makes Regular Show work. The episodic format was not just a structural choice, it was a philosophical one. Regular Show was a show about the regular, about mundane days that went sideways, about the experience of working a boring job and having something extraordinary happen, and then going back to the boring job the next day as if nothing had changed. The episodic format reinforced this worldview. Nothing was permanent. Nothing carried over. Tomorrow was another day at the park. Serialization changed that. When the show started telling stories that required you to remember what happened last week, when consequences started accumulating, when characters started changing in ways that could not be undone, the show stopped being about the regular. It started being about the exceptional. And some fans felt that this was a betrayal of the show's core identity. Others argued the opposite. They said the serialization was the show growing up, that an episodic sitcom about a park was appropriate for the early seasons, when the show was finding its voice and the audience was young, but that a serialized epic about cosmic stakes was appropriate for the final seasons, when the show had matured and the audience had matured with it. The shift from episodic to serialized mirrored the shift from childhood to adulthood. Life starts episodic. Each day is its own contained story. But as you get older, the days start connecting. Consequences accumulate. Choices compound. The narrative of your life becomes serialized, whether you want it to or not. Both perspectives have merit, but the tension between them is real, and it surfaces in virtually every conversation about Regular Show's later seasons. Was the show better when it was simple? Was the show better when it was complex? Was the space arc a natural evolution or a forced departure? These are not questions that can be answered definitively, and the fact that they cannot be answered is, itself, the controversy. Let us return to the love triangle for a moment, not to rehash the events, which we have already covered in detail, but to examine a specific aspect that often gets overlooked: the fan reaction to CJ's powers. CJ is a cloud person. When she becomes emotionally distressed, her skin turns gray and thunder rumbles around her. When she is angry, she can generate actual storms. Her emotional state has physical consequences. She is, literally, a force of nature when she is upset. This detail was the subject of significant fan debate. Some viewers read CJ's storm powers as a metaphor for emotional volatility, for the way that some people's anger is not just a feeling, but an event that affects everyone around them. They argued that CJ's powers made her a challenging character in ways both positive and negative. Positive because they gave her genuine dramatic weight. Negative because they occasionally framed her justified anger as dangerous, as something to be feared rather than respected. Other viewers saw CJ's powers as a form of victim blaming embedded in the show's mechanics. When Mordecai hurts CJ, CJ becomes a storm. The storm is scary. The narrative attention shifts from Mordecai's betrayal to CJ's reaction. The conversation becomes about whether CJ is overreacting rather than whether Mordecai was wrong. Her powers, in this reading, serve as a narrative device that deflects attention from the actual source of conflict, Mordecai's behavior, and redirects it toward the person who was wronged. This is a sophisticated reading, and it generated heated discussion in fan communities. The show never explicitly addresses the politics of CJ's powers. It never frames her storms as either justified or unjustified. It simply depicts them as a consequence of her emotional state, which is itself a consequence of how she is treated by the people around her. But the absence of explicit framing is itself a choice. By not commenting on the implications of CJ's powers, the show left space for both sympathetic and unsympathetic interpretations, and the fans filled that space with exactly the kind of passionate disagreement that regular show always seemed to generate. And as always, if you are enjoying the video, subscribing is the best way to support the channel. There is one more thread we need to follow before this essay reaches its conclusion. It is the thread of regular show's influence on the animation industry, and the controversy that comes with being a show that changed the landscape. When regular show premiered in 2010, it was part of a wave of creator-driven animated shows on Cartoon Network that would come to be known as the network's second golden age. Adventure Time, which premiered earlier in 2010, had already demonstrated that animated shows could be simultaneously weird, emotional, and commercially successful. Regular show, arriving a few months later, proved it was not a fluke. Steven Universe would follow in 2013, Over the Garden Wall in 2014. The era of creator-driven Cartoon Network animation produced some of the most critically acclaimed and culturally significant animated television in history. Regular show's specific contribution to this era was its tonal range. Before regular show, the conventional wisdom in children's animation was that you could be funny or you could be emotional, but trying to be both at the same time was risky. Regular show destroyed that assumption. An episode could start with a "my mom" joke and end with a character confronting the reality of death. A season could alternate between slapstick comedy and genuine tragedy, without either mode undermining the other. The show proved that audiences, including young audiences, could handle tonal complexity, that they did not need shows to be one thing, that they could laugh and cry in the same 11 minutes and come away feeling like both responses were appropriate. This influence is visible in virtually every animated show that followed. The tonal whiplash of Gravity Falls, the emotional depth of Amphibia, the willingness of the Owl House to tackle dark themes within a comedic framework. All of these shows owe a debt to the path that regular show helped clear. And J.G. Quintel's own follow-up show, Close Enough, which premiered on HBO Max in 2020, was an explicit continuation of regular show's tonal approach, applied to adult characters dealing with the specific anxieties of parenthood and aging. But influence creates its own kind of controversy. Some critics argue that regular show's success gave permission to a wave of animated shows that prioritize important themes over entertainment, that use emotional devastation as a substitute for good writing, that mistake darkness for depth. The argument goes that regular show earned its emotional moments through careful character development and precise storytelling, but the shows it influenced sometimes skip the development and go straight for the tears. The controversy is not about regular show itself, but about the legacy it left behind, and whether that legacy has been more helpful or harmful to the medium. This is an unfair burden to place on any single show. Regular show did not ask to be influential. It did not set out to change animation. It set out to be a show about two friends at a park, and it succeeded so thoroughly that everything around it changed. The controversy of influence is the controversy of success. When something works, everything that comes after it is measured against it, and the measurement is never entirely fair. But before we get to our final episode analysis, there is something we need to discuss about the show's use of nostalgia and music, because this is an area where regular show generated a specific kind of cultural controversy that is distinct from everything we have covered so far. Regular show is drenched in the aesthetics of the 1980s and early 1990s. The VHS tapes, the cassette players, the arcade machines, the synthesizer-heavy score by Mark Mothersbaugh, the legendary composer from the band Devo, who composed the music throughout the entire series, working on 233 of 244 episodes. The visual design of the character's living space, with its wood-paneled walls and analog technology, evokes a specific era of American life that predates the internet and the smartphone, an era that the show's creators grew up in, but that the show's audience, largely, did not. This creates an interesting cultural dynamic. Regular Show is a show made by people who are nostalgic for the 1980s and watched by people who never experienced the 1980s. The nostalgia is secondhand. The audience learns to feel nostalgic for an era they have no personal memory of, and the feeling is real, even though the experience is borrowed. This is what makes Regular Show's use of nostalgia both powerful and controversial. It is teaching young people to miss something they never had. It is selling them a version of the past that is curated, aestheticized, and stripped of the actual problems of the 1980s. The Cold War anxiety, the economic inequality, the social conservatism. What remains is the warmth, the simplicity, the imagined coziness of a world before the internet made everything fast and loud and overwhelming. Some critics argued that this nostalgic framing was fundamentally dishonest, that it idealized a past that was no better than the present, merely different. That teaching children to feel nostalgic for an era they never lived through is a kind of emotional manipulation, a way of making them dissatisfied with the present by offering a romanticized alternative that never actually existed. Other critics argued the opposite. They said that Regular Show's nostalgia was not about the 1980s at all. It was about the feeling of being young. The VHS tapes and arcade machines were not artifacts of a specific decade. They were symbols of a specific experience. The experience of discovering things for the first time, of playing games with your friends, of watching movies on a Saturday afternoon with nothing else to do. The nostalgia was not for a time period. It was for a state of being. And that state of being is universal, regardless of when you were born. The music reinforces this reading. Regular Show's soundtrack is not just a collection of retro references. It is a carefully curated emotional landscape. The synthesizers create a specific mood, dreamy and wistful and slightly melancholy, that matches the show's emotional register. The music tells you how to feel before the story does. And when the show uses licensed music, as it does in the finale with David Bowie's Heroes, the choice is precise. Heroes is a song about transcendence, about two people who can be heroes just for one day. It is a song about the fragility of beauty and the courage it takes to reach for something meaningful, even when you know it will not last. It is the perfect song for a show about a park full of people who are heroes just for one day, every day, in the small and invisible ways that nobody notices until it is too late. The use of heroes in the finale was itself a minor controversy. Some fans felt it was perfect, a devastating and appropriate choice that elevated the finale to something genuinely transcendent. Others felt it was too obvious, that using a David Bowie song in a moment of emotional climax was a shortcut, a way of borrowing someone else's artistic weight, rather than earning it through the show's own craft. Both reactions are valid. Both miss the point slightly. The point is that Regular Show's entire existence was a conversation with the culture it emerged from. It borrowed constantly, from 1980s movies, from video game culture, from stoner comedies, from Japanese anime. The borrowing was not theft, it was a dialogue. The show took elements from dozens of sources, combined them, and produced something that felt, despite all the references, entirely new. Heroes in the finale was the last word in that dialogue. A David Bowie song in a cartoon about two slackers at a park, playing over the death of a lollipop man. It should not work. It works perfectly. Let us talk about one final, specific episode that crystallized the tension between Regular Show's comedic identity and its willingness to go dark. Trucker Hall of Fame, a Season 4 episode, centers on Muscle Man receiving a package from his recently deceased father, Muscle Dad. The package contains a trucker hat and a cassette tape with instructions for a road trip that Muscle Dad had planned before he died. The episode follows Muscle Man as he completes the road trip, visiting locations that meant something to his father, listening to his father's voice on the tape, processing his grief one stop at a time. It is, structurally, a buddy comedy about a road trip. But the emotional engine is not comedy. It is a son saying goodbye to his father. And the show gives that goodbye the time and space it deserves. By the end of the episode, Muscle Man has reached the final destination. His father's voice on the tape delivers a last message. And Muscle Man, the character defined by crude humor and juvenile pranks, stands alone in a significant place and quietly mourns a man he loved. This is the same character who makes my mom jokes. This is the character that some fans wanted removed from the show for being annoying. And here he is, breaking your heart, because the show trusted him with a story about grief, and he rose to meet it. The controversy around Muscle Man, the debate about whether he was a liability or an asset to the show, dissolves in episodes like Trucker Hall of Fame. He is both. He is the annoying joke machine and the grieving son. He is the character who makes you groan and the character who makes you cry. And the refusal to be one or the other is what makes regular shows' characters feel alive. This is the pattern. Every controversy in regular show traces back to the same fundamental tension. The show is two things at once. It is a comedy and a drama. It is for children and for adults. It is episodic and serialized. It is irreverent and sincere. It is a show about nothing and a show about everything. The controversies arise because audiences want shows to be one thing, to fit into categories, to meet expectations consistently. Regular show refused. Every time the audience thought they understood what it was, the show showed them something else. And that something else was either brilliant or infuriating, depending on which version of the show you had fallen in love with. Consider the not great double date episode from season 6, which aired on June 22, 2015. In this episode, CJ, in an attempt to ease the tension between herself and Margaret, suggests a double date. Mordecai and CJ will go out with Margaret and her boyfriend. The problem is that Margaret does not have a boyfriend. She lies about it to avoid CJ's potential wrath. She fabricates a relationship with a man named Del Hanlon. The double date proceeds under false pretenses, and when the lie is eventually exposed, when a kiss cam at a sporting event forces Margaret to admit she does not actually have a boyfriend, the fragile peace between the two women shatters. The episode is a masterclass in cringe comedy. Every scene is excruciating because the audience knows the truth that the characters are hiding from each other. The comedy comes from the gap between what is being said and what is actually happening. But the episode is also about something deeper. It is about the impossibility of clean resolutions in messy emotional situations. CJ wants to be the bigger person. She wants to move past her jealousy. But her jealousy is justified, and moving past it requires a level of trust that the situation does not support. Margaret wants to keep the peace. But keeping the peace requires lying, and the lie makes everything worse. There is no villain in this episode. There is no right answer. There are just people trying to navigate an impossible situation and failing. And the failure is both funny and painful. Regular show never lets you feel one thing at a time. It always demands that you hold two contradictory emotions simultaneously. And that demand is what made the show great, and what made the show controversial. Because holding two emotions at once is hard, and some people would rather just feel one. The treatment of Margaret as a character deserves its own examination. Margaret Smith is one of the most debated characters in the regular show fandom, not because of anything she does wrong, but because of what the show does with her. In the early seasons, Margaret is primarily defined by her relationship to Mordecai. She is the girl at the coffee shop. She is the object of Mordecai's affection. She is sweet, kind, and somewhat underdeveloped, a love interest more than a character. When Margaret leaves for college, the show briefly suggests that she is going to become her own person, that the distance from Mordecai will allow her to develop an identity independent of his feelings for her. And when she returns as a TV reporter, there is a version of this story where that promise is fulfilled, where Margaret comes back stronger, more defined, more interesting. But that is not what happens. When Margaret returns, she is pulled immediately back into the Mordecai orbit. Her new career is mentioned but never explored. Her independence is acknowledged but never dramatized. She becomes, once again, a point on a triangle rather than a person with her own story. And the kiss at the Christmas party crystallizes the problem. Margaret's role in the love triangle is not as an agent making choices. It is as a catalyst that causes Mordecai to make terrible choices. She exists, in the narrative structure, to make things worse. Fans who defended Margaret argued that this reading was unfair, that Margaret loved Mordecai, that the kiss was mutual, that she should not be blamed for another person's infidelity. Fans who criticized her argued that the show failed her as a character, that she deserved better writing, that her potential was sacrificed on the altar of the love triangle. Both groups were right. The show did fail Margaret, and Margaret was not responsible for Mordecai's choices. These two truths coexist, and the fact that they coexist is a reflection of the larger truth about how regular show treated its female characters, with affection and negligence in roughly equal measure. Eileen Roberts, the mole who works with Margaret at the coffee shop and eventually becomes Rigby's girlfriend, fared better. Eileen's character development is steady and consistent across the series. She starts as a shy, nerdy woman with an unrequited crush on Rigby. She ends as a confident, accomplished person who has earned Rigby's respect and love through patience, intelligence, and a refusal to compromise herself for his approval. In the early episodes, Rigby is openly dismissive of Eileen. He does not dislike her exactly, but he does not see her. She is invisible to him the way that quiet, smart, unremarkable people are invisible to people who define themselves through chaos and noise. He looks past her. He talks over her. He treats her as a background feature of the coffee shop, no more interesting than the tables or the chairs. And then, gradually, he begins to see her. It happens so slowly that you can go several episodes without noticing the shift. A conversation that lasts a beat longer than it needs to. A moment where Rigby turns to look at Eileen when she is not looking at him. A scene where they are alone together and neither of them is uncomfortable. The show does not announce these moments. It does not underline them with music or dialogue. It just lets them happen, the way that real attraction happens. Not in a single thunderbolt, but in the quiet accumulation of small recognitions. You notice someone, then you notice them again, then you start looking for them when they are not there. By the time Rigby and Eileen are officially together, the relationship feels earned in a way that Mordecai's relationships never do. Eileen did not have to compete with anyone. She did not have to fight for Rigby's attention. She just had to be herself, consistently, patiently, until Rigby grew up enough to recognize what was in front of him. And the beautiful irony of the show is that Rigby's growth, his decision to get his GED, his gradual transformation from a selfish child into a functioning adult, is largely motivated by his desire to be worthy of Eileen. She does not ask him to change. She does not demand it. She simply exists as a person of substance. And Rigby, recognizing that substance, decides to become a person of substance himself. Their relationship is the show's healthiest romance, and it is no accident that it is also the quietest. Eileen and Rigby do not generate controversy because their love story does not involve lies, betrayals, or public humiliations. They just gradually, believably fall in love. And the lack of drama is, in a show defined by drama, its own kind of statement. The show is telling you something important by placing the healthiest relationship in the background and the most dysfunctional relationship in the foreground. It is telling you that healthy love is not dramatic. It is not the stuff of epic episodes and tearful confrontations. It is two people showing up for each other every day, without fanfare, without crisis, without the kind of emotional volatility that makes for good television but terrible partnerships. The Rigby and Eileen relationship also complicates the Mordecai criticism in important ways. If Mordecai is a cautionary tale about how not to handle romantic relationships, Rigby is the counterexample sitting right next to him, and the audience sees both. They see Mordecai kissing Margaret at a Christmas party while his girlfriend is in the next room, and they see Rigby quietly falling in love with a mole who believes in him when nobody else does. They see Mordecai making a speech about his own confusion at someone else's wedding, and they see Rigby giving a graduation speech on Inspire America because he put in the work. The contrast is devastating, and the show never draws attention to it. It never has a character point out the irony. It just places the two stories side by side and trusts the audience to do the math. The contrast between Mordecai's romantic life and Rigby's romantic life is one of the show's most effective narrative tools. Mordecai, the tall, attractive, outwardly confident character, is a disaster in relationships. Rigby, the short, lazy, outwardly immature character, finds genuine love and builds a real partnership. The show never comments on this contrast directly. It never has a character say, "Hey, Rigby is actually better at relationships than Mordecai." It just shows you. And the showing is more powerful than any commentary could be, because it forces the audience to draw its own conclusions, rather than having conclusions drawn for them. This brings us to a broader pattern in regular show that generated its own form of quiet controversy: the show's treatment of masculinity. Mordecai and Rigby are, by the standards of their world, young men. They work at a park. They play video games. They avoid responsibility. They compete with each other. They suppress their emotions until those emotions explode in destructive ways. They are, in the vocabulary of cultural criticism, performing a version of masculinity that the show simultaneously indulges and critiques. The indulgence is the comedy. The video games, the slacking, the trash talk, the physical comedy. All of this is presented as fun, as the stuff of male friendship, as the reason the show exists. The critique is the consequence. Every time Mordecai and Rigby indulge their worst impulses, the world breaks around them. Every time they avoid responsibility, someone else pays the price. Every time they refuse to communicate honestly, a relationship is damaged. The show loves its protagonists. It celebrates their friendship, but it never lies about the cost of their immaturity. This dual perspective created a fascinating split in the audience. Some viewers, particularly younger male viewers, identified with Mordecai and Rigby's lifestyle without irony. The slacking was aspirational. The friendship was the dream. The consequences were just the mechanism that generated the comedy. Other viewers, particularly as they aged alongside the show, began to see the critique underneath the celebration. They realized that Mordecai and Rigby were not models for how to live. They were warnings. Lovable, relatable, deeply flawed warnings about what happens when you refuse to grow up, wrapped in a package that made refusing to grow up look incredibly appealing. That tension between the appeal of arrested development and the consequences of arrested development is the engine of the entire show. It is what makes regular show a comedy, and it is what makes regular show profound. The controversy is that both readings are correct, and you cannot have one without the other. This is what regular show did better than almost any other animated show of its era. It trusted its audience. It trusted children to handle death. It trusted teenagers to handle moral ambiguity. It trusted adults to see past the crude humor to the emotional sophistication underneath. And it trusted everyone to sit with discomfort, to hold contradictory feelings, to understand that a show can be funny and sad and infuriating and beautiful and wrong and right, all at the same time, all in the same episode, all in the same scene. The controversies were the proof of that trust. Every debate, every argument, every passionate fan essay about whether Mordecai should have ended up with Margaret or CJ or Steph, every complaint about the space arc, every defense of Muscle Man's humor, every discussion of whether Over the Top should have been banned, all of it was evidence that regular show had succeeded in doing the hardest thing a show can do. It made people care, not in a passive way, not in the "I enjoyed that" way that most entertainment generates, in the active, combative, deeply personal way that only happens when a show has gotten under your skin and made itself part of how you understand the world. Let us bring this to a close, but not quickly, because the ending of a story this long deserves the same patience we have brought to every other part of it. There is a generation of people who are now in their 20s and early 30s, for whom regular show was not just a television program. It was a clock. It measured the years. It started when they were children and ended when they were adults. And the space between those 2 points was filled with episodes that, without their realizing it, were teaching them how the world works. Not through lessons, not through morals delivered at the end of each story, through demonstration, through the slow accumulation of evidence about what it means to be a person. They learned about friendship from Mordecai and Rigby, not the sanitized version, where friends are always supportive and never hurt each other, but the real version, where friends betray each other and forgive each other and resent each other and need each other in roughly equal measure. They learned that your best friend can steal your future, and that you can choose to forgive them anyway. They learned that forgiveness is not a feeling, it is a decision, and the decision costs something every time you make it. They learned about work from Benson and Skips and the park. They learned that most jobs are not callings, that most bosses are not villains or mentors, but exhausted people trying to keep something running with insufficient resources and uncooperative staff. They learned that showing up every day, even when the work is boring and the people are frustrating, is itself a form of courage. Not dramatic courage, quiet courage, the kind that does not get recognized because it looks, from the outside, like nothing at all. They learned about love from the Mordecai, Margaret, and CJ triangle. They learned the hard way. They learned that you can love someone completely and still be wrong for them. That timing matters as much as feeling. That the person you are at 20 is not the person you will be at 30. And the relationship that felt like everything at 20 might feel like a memory at 30. They learned that indecision is a form of cruelty. That not choosing is itself a choice. And that the people hurt by your inability to decide do not care about your internal anguish. They care about the bruise. They learned about loss from Pops. They learned that the kindest person you know might be the one who has to leave first. That goodness does not protect you from the universe. That sacrifice is not glamorous. It is the act of giving up everything you are so that the people you love can keep being who they are. Pops did not sacrifice himself because he was brave, although he was. He sacrificed himself because he loved. And love, in regular show's final estimation, is not a feeling you have. It is a thing you do. It is flying into a sun. These are not children's lessons. These are human lessons. And the controversy that surrounded regular show for its entire run was, in the end, a controversy about whether a children's cartoon was allowed to teach human lessons. Whether a show on Cartoon Network, airing between commercials for toys and cereal, had the right to be this honest about how life actually works. The answer, obviously, is yes. The answer has always been yes. Art does not need permission to tell the truth. It just needs an audience willing to listen. And regular show had that audience. It had millions of them. And those millions argued about the show, not because the show was divisive, but because the truth is divisive. Because the truth about friendship is that it hurts. The truth about love is that it fails. The truth about growing up is that it costs you everything you had as a child, and you cannot go back, and you would not want to go back, and you miss it anyway. There is a moment in the finale, just before the final confrontation, where the park crew gathers together. They are about to face the end of the universe. They are scared, they are uncertain, and they look at each other, these mismatched characters who have spent 8 seasons irritating each other and saving each other in roughly equal measure, and there is a recognition in that look. A recognition that these are the people they chose, not through careful selection, not through rational evaluation, through the simple, stubborn act of showing up every day to the same park, doing the same job, dealing with the same problems, until proximity became something more, until coworkers became friends, until friends became family, until family became the thing worth saving when the universe decided to end. That is what regular show is about. Underneath every controversy, underneath every banned episode and every censored joke and every fan debate about who Mordecai should have ended up with, it is about the family you build by accident. The people you did not choose who become the people you cannot live without. The park is not just a park. It is the place where these people found each other. And when it was launched into space, they went with it. Not because they had to, but because leaving each other was unthinkable. Every controversy we have discussed in this essay is, in some way, a reflection of that central truth. Fans argued about the love triangle because they cared about the family and feared it was being damaged. Fans argued about the space arc because they cared about the park and feared it was being abandoned. Fans argued about Pops' death because they cared about the kindest member of the family and could not bear to lose him. The controversies were expressions of love. Complicated, frustrated, sometimes irrational love. But love. And that is the most regular show thing of all. Love that is complicated. Love that is frustrated. Love that is sometimes irrational. Love that shows up every day anyway. Because what else are you going to do? That is Mordecai and Rigby. That is Muscle Man and Starla. That is Skips, skipping eternally in memory of Mona. That is Benson, yelling at people he secretly cannot imagine living without. That is Pops, watching a VHS tape in heaven, smiling at the chaos and the beauty and the mess of it all. Jolly good show. Regular show ran for 8 seasons, over 240 episodes, across 7 years of American television. It was created by a man who made a student film about dropping acid and somehow turned it into one of the most beloved cartoons of a generation. It was banned in multiple countries, censored on multiple continents, sued by a professional gamer, and split its own audience into factions that argued about a Blue Jays love life with the intensity of geopolitical analysts debating a border dispute. It was a show about a park, about 2 friends, about the distance between who you are and who you want to be, and about the lifetime you spend trying to close that distance, knowing you never fully will. It was a show that aired in 2010, when the children who watched it believed that cartoons were just cartoons. And it ended in 2017, when those children, now teenagers or young adults, understood that cartoons had been telling them the truth all along. That the silly show about a blue jay and a raccoon was not silly at all. That the controversies, every single one of them, were evidence of how much the show meant. You do not argue passionately about things that do not matter. You argue passionately about things that have become part of you, that have shaped how you see the world, that have given you the language to describe experiences you did not have words for before. That is what Regular Show did. It gave a generation of viewers the language for friendship, for heartbreak, for work, for loss, for the specific feeling of watching someone you care about make a mistake you cannot stop them from making. It gave them Mordecai's indecision, and Rigby's recklessness, and Benson's fury, and Skip's grief, and Pop's impossibly stubborn belief that the world is good. And then it ended, the way all shows end, the way all things end. But Pops is watching, somewhere. From whatever afterlife the show imagined for him, he has his VHS tape. It is labeled Regular Show. He presses play, and the whole thing starts again. Every controversy, every debate, every argument about whether Margaret or CJ was better, whether the space arc worked, whether Muscle Man's jokes were funny, whether the show went too far or not far enough. He watches all of it. The whole complicated, messy, beautiful, infuriating human story. And when it is over, when the credits roll one more time, when the screen goes dark and the only sound is the hum of whatever cosmic television set exists in Pop's version of heaven, he does what he always does. He smiles, he takes a breath, and he says the only thing that needs to be said. Jolly good show. The park is still there. The friends are still there, scattered across time and space and memory, but still there. And the controversies are still there too, because the show earned them. Every single one. Not through shock, not through cynicism, through the simple, radical act of telling the truth about what it means to be alive, in a cartoon about a blue jay and a raccoon, on a children's network, at 4 in the afternoon. Regular Show. Jolly good show. The most regular, extraordinary, controversial, beloved show that Cartoon Network ever made. And the fan reactions, the debates, the anger, the grief, the joy, the exhaustion of caring so much about animated characters who do not exist. Those reactions were never about the show at all. They were about the viewers, about the people who saw themselves in a blue jay who could not commit, and a raccoon who could not grow up, and a gumball machine who could not stop yelling, and a yeti who could not stop grieving, and a lollipop man who could not stop believing. The controversy was the mirror, and what the mirror showed was not Regular Show. It was us. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.